Beneath the veil of clouds, beyond the reaches of familiar roads, and across the untamed corners of our planet lie places that seem too surreal, too majestic, too impossibly beautiful to be real. Towering peaks carved by ancient ice, mountains that whisper myths through the wind, ridgelines that glow beneath northern lights, and volcanic craters forged in fire and time. These are the Earth's most unreal places. In this journey, we venture across continents and cultures to explore landscapes where nature defies expectation, and where each summit, valley, and legend reveals a story etched not just into the stone, but into the spirit of humanity. From the snow-draped silence of the Himalayas to the myth-bound silhouettes of Alaskan mountains, we follow the line where sky meets earth and reality meets wonder. This is a cinematic expedition into the awe-inspiring, the mythical, and the truly surreal corners of the natural world. But before we continue, subscribe to the channel and like the video. High above the verdant folds of the Pyrenees, where the Spanish sky bleeds into the blue void of southwestern France, there lies a jagged limestone massif that locals have long revered and poets have struggled to capture in verse, Monte Perdido. Known in English as Lost Mountain, this towering sentinel of stone is anything but forgotten by those who have witnessed its grandeur. Rising to a formidable 3,355 meters, it is the third highest peak in the Pyrenees and the centerpiece of the Ossa Monte Perdido National Park, a UNESCO World Heritage Site whose otherworldly terrain seems plucked from the dreams of ancient titans. Monte Perdido's very name evokes mystery. Lost not because it is unseen, far from it, but perhaps because its towering summit often disappears into a shroud of mist that rolls across the cliffs like a tide of cloud. The mountain's geological origin is deeply rooted in ancient tectonic upheavals and the slow dance of glacial erosion. Its body is sculpted from massive beds of sedimentary rock, especially limestone and marl, dating back to the Cretaceous and Eocene periods. Unlike many of the world's highest peaks, which are volcanic in origin, Monte Perdido belongs to an altogether different realm, a fossilized ocean floor thrust into the sky by continental collisions. This gives the mountain an appearance at once skeletal and cathedral-like, with sharp ridges and deep vertical flanks that bear the etchings of a million years of wind and rain. What makes Monte Perdido particularly surreal is not just its raw geology, but the theater it commands below. The Ossa Valley, one of the four dramatic glacial canyons fanning out beneath the massif, is a lush, prime-val place where cascading waterfalls plummet from vertical cliffs and emerald forests shift with the moods of the seasons. Spring sends a million wildflowers erupting from the meadows, and autumn turns the beech and fir trees into columns of burning gold and copper. Marmots whistle from crags, and the elusive bearded vulture, or lemurgia, soars overhead with its improbable wingspan and haunting cry. Ibex cling to impossible ledges, and far below, rivers born from alpine snowmelt whisper through the valley like ghostly song. Climbing Monte Perdido is not for the faint of heart, but it rewards the daring. The standard route ascends from the Gorais Mountain Refuge, following a steep, often snow-choked couloir that leads to a final scramble across broken stone. The summit offers a panoramic spectacle. To the north, France spreads out in green and grey relief. To the south, the Spanish foothills unravel into layers of fog and shadow. And always, there is the silence, not empty, but sacred. It is a silence that seems to belong to an older world. Cultural memory clings tightly to Monte Perdido. The mountain has long been sacred to the Aragonese people and nearby villages like Torla and Bulsa, whose history is steeped in folklore, alpine survival, and quiet reverence for the land. The nearby Anisclo and Pineta valleys, equally surreal in their own right, seem carved by the hands of mythological beings, impossibly steep walls that rise like ruined fortresses from the mist. And above them all, Monte Perdido looms, a ghost of time and stone. Its surrealism lies not just in its shape, nor its elevation, but in the way it defies expectations. It is both cathedral and skeleton, ruin and fortress. A mountain that once lay beneath the sea, now a throne in the clouds. It is the kind of place that makes one believe in older magic, not fantasy, but a primordial truth older than language. Cloaked in mist and mystery, Mount Taranaki, also known as Mount Egmont, rises with almost supernatural symmetry from the western coast of New Zealand's North Island, like a vision torn from the dreams of ancient volcanism. Its near-perfect conical shape has made it one of the most visually striking peaks on Earth, often compared to Japan's Mount Fuji. And indeed, at first glance, it could easily be mistaken for it, a solitary peak sheathed in deep green forests and capped with snow, its slopes plummeting in flawless radial lines toward the sea. But Mount Taranaki is no mere lookalike. It is its own being, older, more secretive, and steeped in the ancestral breath of Aotearoa. Rising 2,518 meters above sea level, Mount Taranaki commands an undeniable presence, both in the landscape and in the cultural memory of New Zealand's indigenous Maori people. According to Maori legend, Taranaki once lived among the other volcanoes of the North Island Central Plateau, particularly Tongariro, Ruapepu, and Ngauruhoe. Taranaki fell in love with the beautiful mountain Pahanga, but so did Tongariro, who challenged Taranaki in a fierce battle. Wounded and exiled, Taranaki fled west, carving the path of the Wanganui River as he dragged himself toward the sea, where he now broods in isolation. This myth doesn't just animate the mountain, it is the mountain. For the Maori, the mountain is a living ancestor, and its moods are not merely weather patterns, but expressions of deep and sacred will. Geologically, Mount Taranaki is a relatively young stratovolcano, about 120,000 years old, and though it has been dormant since its last eruption in 1854, it is still considered active. The mountain is the focal point of Egmont National Park, an extraordinary radial ecosystem that fans out like a green mandala around its slopes. This unique circular pattern can be seen clearly from satellite images. Dense rainforest encircles the peak in a dark green ring, giving way to lighter farmland in the surrounding plains, almost like a protective moat of trees encircling a sacred tower. This perfectly round boundary wasn't designed by human hands but set by nature and preserved by early conservation laws, which designated the park's radial symmetry as a protected natural feature. Walking into this ring of forest is like crossing a threshold into another world. The atmosphere changes immediately, damp, rich, and ancient. You step into what feels like the lungs of the earth. Massive tree ferns unfurl their prehistoric fronds beneath a canopy of towering rimu and kamahi trees. Mosses and lichens coat every surface. Birdsong echoes eerily through the undergrowth, and streams meander down from the mountain slopes like veins of living silver. This is Goblin Forest, a name that perfectly captures its dripping, moss-draped, enchanted quality. In these woods, the air is heavy with history and life. Even in broad daylight, it feels like twilight under the thick green cover. Above the forests, alpine meadows stretch toward the summit, and the trail becomes rougher, more exposed. Hiking Mount Taranaki is deceptively treacherous. Though it may not be particularly tall by international standards, the mountain's steep slopes and rapidly changing weather have claimed many lives. It is one of New Zealand's deadliest peaks. The mist that so often swaddles its summit is both beautiful and dangerous. One moment you may be climbing under clear skies, and the next, swallowed in a whiteoat. Time itself seems to fold in the mist, leaving hikers disoriented in a world of grey and silence. Yet for those who reach the summit, typically after a grueling climb up the North Ridge track, the reward is incomparable. The view, when it reveals itself, is transcendent. The Pacific Ocean glistens to the west, the vast green quilt of the Taranaki region stretches in every direction, and far in the distance, the snowy peaks of Ruapepu and Tongariro punctuate the horizon. On rare clear days, the curvature of the earth becomes visible, and the eye can trace the boundary between sea and sky with haunting precision. Taranaki's volcanic perfection, however, hides an ancient truth: it is capable of devastating eruption. Past eruptions have sent lahars, massive flows of volcanic mud and debris, cascading down its flanks, reshaping valleys and burying ancient forests. The mountain's quiet does not guarantee safety. Scientists have warned that Taranaki is overdue for an eruption, and extensive planning has been done to prepare the nearby town of New Plymouth and other settlements for potential volcanic activity. Unlike many other peaks that have faded into geological slumber, Taranaki simply waits, and its wait has stretched long enough to make people forget the true nature of volcanoes. They are beautiful, yes, but also deeply violent. Beyond the science and myth, Mount Taranaki holds a rare power, a surreal, almost mystical ambience that defies language. The symmetry of its slopes plays tricks on the eyes, especially when viewed from the air or across the fields of the Taranaki Plains. Clouds swirl around its flanks as though drawn in by gravity. Sunsets bleed across its snowcap like molten gold. In winter, its summit glows beneath a silver blanket, while the lower slopes remain cloaked in emerald green. It is a mountain that exists in opposites: tropical rainforest and alpine tundra, stillness and violence, legend and geology, all compressed into a single, solitary monument. Perhaps most striking is the way it commands reverence from those who live nearby. The Maori view the mountain as tapu, sacred, and protocols exist regarding how one should behave in its presence. Many Maori object to climbing the summit, believing it disrespectful to stand on the head of a living ancestor. Respect is not optional here. It is woven into the very spirit of the place. In 1978, Mount Taranaki and the surrounding parklands were returned to the Maori people and then gifted back to the nation in a gesture of co-governance and recognition of indigenous guardianship. Today, the mountain is treated not merely as a natural attraction, but as a sacred being, one that deserves not just admiration, but reverence. Photographers travel from around the world to try and capture the mountain's ethereal beauty, particularly during those magical moments when the mist parts and the full geometry of the cone is revealed. At sunrise or dusk, Taranaki seems to glow from within, a ghost of fire frozen in time. In its reflection on nearby Puakai Tarn, the mountain becomes doubly surreal, an upside-down volcano on a pool of perfect stillness, hovering between worlds. Mount Taranaki is not just a mountain, it is an axis mundi, a bridge between sky and earth, myth and matter, life and death. To see it is to glimpse the soul of the land itself, veiled in mist and shaped by forces we can scarcely comprehend. It is not merely one of the most unreal places on the planet. It is a reminder that some places are so steeped in story, so exact in their elegance, so alive in their silence, that they seem less like features of geography and more like sacred dreams risen from the earth. In the vast wilderness of British Columbia, where nature still rules with an untamed hand and the silence of the high alpine can thunder louder than any voice, there stands a colossus of cold stone and glacial ice, Mount Robson. At 3,954 meters, 12,972 feet, it is the tallest peak in the Canadian Rockies, a mighty throne of vertical ambition and elemental fury. But Mount Robson is more than a record-setting summit. It is a geological cathedral, a snow-draped monolith so awe-inspiring in stature and presence that it seems to command the sky itself. This is not a mountain that merely rises. It looms, brooding above the forests, rivers, and valleys below like a frozen king watching over his realm. Mount Robson's vertical prominence is startling, even when compared to taller peaks in other ranges. What makes it especially striking is the fact that it rises nearly 3,000 meters, almost 10,000 feet, from its base, a massive elevation gain that occurs over a relatively short horizontal distance. This steepness gives Mount Robson an unusually dramatic profile, a silhouette that looks impossibly high, even to seasoned mountaineers. The mountain's south face, in particular, presents a nearly sheer wall of rock and ice that has become legendary in climbing circles, both feared and revered for its scale and difficulty. Located in Mount Robson Provincial Park, itself a part of the larger Canadian Rocky Mountain UNESCO World Heritage Site, the mountain sits like a sentinel on the western edge of the Continental Divide. Here, the earth fractures and folds into an epic tapestry of ridges, cirques, and glacier, each more surreal than the last. The park is a place of old-growth forests, ice-bound lakes, tumbling waterfalls, and wildlife corridors that are among the most intact on the planet. Grizzly bears roam freely. Elk and moose browse in alpine meadows. Eagles spiral over glacial valleys. And through the heart of this wilderness runs the famed Berg Lake Trail, a route that many regard as one of the most beautiful hikes on Earth. To walk the Berg Lake Trail is to step into a world of impossible contrasts and raw magnificence. The trail begins modestly enough, winding through mossy cedar hemlock forests, the air rich with the scent of pine needles and earth. But soon, the terrain begins to climb. Waterfalls explode from the mountainside, most famously Emperor Falls, which thunders down beside the trail in a curtain of spray so intense that even from a distance, hikers emerge soaked. The roar is constant, like the voice of the mountain itself. Beyond Emperor Falls, the trail pushes into subalpine meadows where marmots whistle from the rocks and ice fields begin to appear above the tree line. Then, suddenly, and without warning, the entire north face of Mount Robson reveals itself, and with it, Berg Lake. This glacier-fed jewel of surreal turquoise lies cradled at the mountain's base, its surface often scattered with icebergs carved from the Robson Glacier above. The face of the mountain towers vertically from the lake, a tapestry of black rock and blue-white seracs that seem to defy gravity. Even in the height of summer, the summit is usually cloaked in snow, and the air carries a chill whisper from the glacier that cling to its flanks. The Robson Glacier itself is a striking sight, a frozen river of ice that seems to move even while standing still. It's a reminder that this is not just a mountain to be admired from afar. It is a dynamic, living force, constantly reshaping the landscape, constantly reminding visitors that time here is measured in geologic ages, not human lifetimes. Avalanches rumble regularly from its cliffs, sending echoes down the valley like the rolling growl of some buried god. Even the wind here speaks differently, thinner, sharper, and always with a bite. Climbing Mount Robson is an undertaking of extreme commitment and skill. Despite being one of the most desired summits in North America, its summit success rate remains shockingly low, often less than 10%. This is not due to technical difficulty alone, but to the notoriously volatile weather. Robson creates its own weather systems, and storms can form in minutes, blanketing the peak in whiteout conditions and gale-force winds. Many seasoned alpinists have been turned back mere meters from the summit. Those few who do reach the top often speak of it in hushed, almost reverent tones, not as a conquest, but as a rare audience granted by something greater. For indigenous peoples of the region, Mount Robson has long been a place of power and story. The Secwepemc people, among others, have known this mountain not as a feature of terrain but as a presence, an entity. Its name in some local dialects translates roughly to the mountain of the spiral road, a reference, perhaps, to the swirling clouds that forever seem to wreath its summit, or the twisted paths climbers must follow in their attempt to reach its heights. It is said that the spirits live high in the clouds here, where no man can dwell for long. This understanding, that Mount Robson is not just high, but sacred, permeates the landscape, giving it an otherworldly stillness that transcends even its epic form. From a geological standpoint, Robson is a marvel. Composed largely of sedimentary rock from the Cambrian period, it contains some of the oldest exposed material in the Rockies. The visible bands of shale and quartzite on its flanks are not just beautiful, they are relics of a primordial sea that once covered this land more than 500 million years ago. Fossils found in the area tell stories of life forms long vanished, etched forever into the very stone of the mountain. In this way, Robson is not just a summit, it is a record, a chronicle in ice and stone of Earth's deep time. The sheer magnitude of Mount Robson has also made it a focal point of environmental protection and ecological study. Scientists monitor its glacier closely, noting how they have receded significantly over the past century. Like many great peaks of the world, it stands as a sentinel warning of climate change, a place where the past, present, and uncertain future all collide in one frozen monument. And yet, for now, it endures. It broods. It remains. To visit Mount Robson, even just to stand in its shadow, is to be changed. There are few places on Earth where scale becomes so visceral, where the human body feels so infinitesimal, and yet the human soul so vast. Something about the mountain expands perception. It demands silence, not from fear, but from awe. It humbles not through danger alone, but by revealing the immense complexity of beauty in its most elemental form. Here, one realizes that unreal places are not imagined or manufactured, they are simply rare, and sacred, and fiercely, defiantly real. Far out in the shimmering expanse of the Indian Ocean, nestled east of Madagascar and cloaked in layers of mist and legend, lies one of Earth's most surreal natural wonders, Piton des Neiges. Rising to 3,070 meters, 10,070 feet, it is the highest point on Réunion Island and the entire Indian Ocean region. But height alone does not define this colossal sentinel. What makes Piton des Neiges so unreal is not merely its elevation, but its presence, the way it appears to float above the clouds like a stone fortress in the sky, a dormant volcano surrounded by one of the most fantastical, otherworldly landscapes on the planet. Translated literally, Piton des Neiges means peak of snows, and while it rarely sees snowfall today, its name recalls the island's colder volcanic past. The volcano itself is a remnant of deep geological time, a massive shield volcano formed more than 3 million years ago through relentless eruptions that eventually birthed Réunion Island. Today, Piton des Neiges slumbers, its last eruption estimated to have occurred over 20,000 years ago, leaving behind an extinct volcanic cone that looms like a sleeping titan above a landscape carved by time, lava, and water. Unlike many volcanic landscapes that feel barren or bleak, the terrain surrounding Piton des Neiges is lush, surreal, and absurdly diverse. As you ascend its flanks, you pass through a kaleidoscope of ecosystems, from tropical forests to alpine heath, from fern-clad valleys to high rocky ridgelines often draped in cloud. The contrast is staggering. In one moment, you're trekking through jungle paths filled with the songs of exotic birds. In the next, you're above the cloud line, where the air is crisp and thin, and the silence feels ancient and eternal. This variety makes Réunion one of the world's most ecologically unique islands, a UNESCO World Heritage Site not only for its biodiversity but also for its dramatic, almost science fiction-like terrain. But perhaps the most otherworldly feature of Piton des Neiges is not the peak itself, but the three gigantic cirques, natural amphitheaters, that radiate out from its base: Silaus, Salazie, and Mafate. These vast, bowl-shaped valleys are the result of the volcano's ancient collapse and millions of years of erosion, forming steep-walled, green-cloaked gorges that look like they belong on an alien planet. Their dimensions are staggering. Vertical cliffs plunge for hundreds of meters into labyrinthine valleys filled with hidden villages, terrace gardens, waterfalls, and winding footpaths. To hike through them is to enter a forgotten world. Mafate, in particular, is perhaps the most legendary. Completely roadless and accessible only on foot or by helicopter, it is a sanctuary of seclusion, where traditional Creole culture endures amidst impossible terrain. Small villages are tucked into folds of the earth where clouds gather and disperse like breath. The people who live here, some descendants of escaped slaves called Marongs, maintain a unique way of life, self-sustained and deeply connected to the land. At night, the sky above Mafate is ink black, interrupted only by stars, while the dark bulk of Piton des Neiges looms in the moonlight like a stone god. The climb to the summit of Piton des Neiges is a rite of passage for visitors to Réunion. Though not a technically difficult hike, it demands stamina, especially when done overnight, the most popular way to experience it. The standard route begins in the Cirque de Silaus, winding through rainforest and mist to the mountain lodge known as the Refuge de la Caverne du Fort, where trekkers rest before the final summit push. Most begin this last stretch around 3 a.m., climbing by headlamp through rocky switchbacks so they can reach the summit in time for sunrise. That sunrise, when it comes, is not simply a view. It is a transformation. As the first rays of light pierce the ocean of clouds below, the entire island seems to float, disembodied in a sea of gold and violet. The cirques light up one by one, their rugged forms emerging from the shadows. The air is thin and still. And all around, the Indian Ocean stretches out to the horizon, endless and surreal, its blues deepening as the sun rises. No photograph can truly capture it. No description can fully convey it. It is the kind of sight that changes a person, that makes them realize how vast the world is, and how lucky we are that places like this still exist. Geologically, Piton des Neiges is the grandfather of Réunion. It is the volcano that gave birth to the island, before passing the torch to its younger and far more active sibling to the southeast, Piton de la Fournaise, one of the world's most active volcanoes. While Fournaise frequently bursts into life, Piton des Neiges watches silently, a guardian of memory and form. The two mountains represent time itself on the island, one young and fiery, the other old and contemplative. But the elder peak is no less dramatic. Its sheer faces, sculpted by millions of years of erosion, tell stories in stone, of lava once flowing, of ancient collapse, of water carving deep into the heart of the rock. From an ecological standpoint, Piton des Neiges is a biodiversity hotspot. The vertical range of elevation means that many rare plant and animal species exist in narrow altitudinal bands, endemic to only specific zones. Giant tree ferns, high-altitude orchids, moss-covered boulders, and lichens give the mountain a dreamlike quality, while birds such as the Réunion harrier or the endemic tuet flutter through the canopies. At higher elevations, the vegetation gives way to alpine scrub and volcanic scree, an austere, lunar landscape that contrasts sharply with the fecundity below. But even here, tiny flowers bloom in sheltered crevices, defiantly alive. Culturally, Piton des Neiges is a symbol of pride and origin. For centuries, it has figured in the spiritual and navigational psyche of the island. Though often obscured by clouds, its presence is always felt, in songs, in stories, in the silhouette it casts on the western sky. Many Creole traditions speak of the mountain not just as a place, but as a being, a slumbering spirit that oversees the rhythm of life on the island. Climbers and hikers often leave offerings at the summit, small tokens of gratitude or remembrance, honoring the ancient forces that shaped this world. In modern times, The mountain has also become a symbol of conservation. Réunion, being a French overseas department, has benefited from European environmental protection initiatives, helping to preserve this unique ecosystem against the twin threats of invasive species and climate change. The challenge remains urgent. As temperatures rise and weather patterns shift, the delicate balance of life on and around Piton des Neiges faces an uncertain future. But for now, the mountain endures, patient, powerful, and majestic. To stand atop Piton des Neiges is to stand above an entire ocean, to feel suspended between sea and sky, past and future. It is one of those places where time seems to stretch thin, where the ordinary laws of geography bend into something mythic. And as the wind rises and the clouds churn below, you may forget for a moment that you are on Earth at all. It feels like the edge of the world. Or perhaps, the beginning of one. In the remote and windswept reaches of Sumbawa, a lesser-known island in the vast Indonesian archipelago, lies a mountain that once tore the sky apart and reshaped not only the land beneath it, but the very course of global history, Gunung Tambora. To stand today on the rim of its massive caldera, gazing into the quiet void left by Earth's most violent tantrum in recorded history, is to peer into the wound of a planet that once screamed. And though its slopes are green again, its forests reborn, and birdsong now echoes where ash once fell, the silence here still holds the echo of that singular, apocalyptic moment in 1815, the year the mountain exploded and the world turned dark. Gunung Tambora rises 2,850 meters, 9,350 feet, above sea level today, but that is only a shadow of its former self. Before April of 1815, Tambora stood proudly at approximately 4,300 meters, over 14,000 feet, making it one of the tallest peaks in the Indonesian archipelago. It was a stratovolcano, a towering, symmetrical giant formed over millennia by the slow layering of lava and ash. But its beauty concealed a terrible pressure building deep within, a subterranean hunger fed by centuries of silence. That silence broke in April of that fateful year, in an eruption so cataclysmic it defies modern comprehension. The mountain didn't merely erupt, it detonated, releasing more energy than any other volcanic event in recorded human history. The explosion was heard as far as 2,000 kilometers away. Reports came from Sumatra, over 1,000 miles distant, where residents thought it was the sound of distant cannon fire. Ash clouds were propelled over 43 kilometers into the stratosphere. The sky darkened, and in the immediate area, life ceased. Whole villages were annihilated. On the flanks of the volcano, pyroclastic flows, searing clouds of superheated gas and debris, raced down the slopes at speeds of up to 700 kilometers per hour, incinerating everything in their path. Entire communities were buried in seconds. An estimated 10,000 people perished instantly, with tens of thousands more dying in the ensuing weeks and months from famine, disease, and displacement. Tambora didn't just destroy itself, it obliterated a civilization. The mountain's summit collapsed inward in a violent implosion, creating the vast caldera that now defines its shape, a yawning crater 6 kilometers wide and over 1,100 meters deep. It is one of the largest volcanic craters on Earth. Seen from its rim today, it is surreal in the truest sense, a vast, sunken world within a world, where clouds drift lazily across the void and shadows play across sheer rock walls that descend into a jungle-lined floor. Rainforests now cling to the inner slopes of the caldera, slowly reclaiming what fire and fury once took. The ecosystem has returned, but the scars remain, ancient, silent, and incomprehensibly vast. But the true legacy of Tambora's eruption reaches far beyond Indonesia. Its impact was global. The eruption released an estimated 160 cubic kilometers of ejecta, including massive volumes of sulfur dioxide. This gas entered the upper atmosphere, spreading across the globe and forming a high-altitude sulfate aerosol veil that dramatically reduced the amount of sunlight reaching Earth's surface. Temperatures dropped worldwide. The year 1816 became known as the year without a summer. Across Europe, North America, and Asia, crops failed, snow fell in June, and famine gripped entire populations. In the northeastern United States, frost struck in July. In Europe, grain prices soared, and riots erupted. Lakes and rivers froze in China in what should have been summer. The sky took on strange hues, copper-red sunsets and silvery veils that haunted observers who had no understanding of their cause. It was a planetary disruption, a reminder that the Earth could, at any moment, assert its dominance over humanity's illusions of control. Culturally, the effects of Tambora rippled in unexpected directions. It is said that the dark, rainy summer of 1816, when English high society was marooned indoors in Geneva due to the cold and storms, directly inspired Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. Lord Byron composed haunting poems about darkness and doom. The world's artists, writers, and thinkers felt the tremor of Tambora in their bones, a collective melancholy born of ash and absence. A volcano in Indonesia had cast a shadow over European literature, art, and science. The modern climate science field itself owes much to the study of this event, the realization that a single mountain could momentarily throttle the global climate system. Today, Gunung Tambora is still active, though in a quieter, more restrained form. The region remains under periodic volcanic monitoring by Indonesia's geological services, and small eruptions have occurred, most recently in 2011. Yet nothing has ever approached the scale of 1815. It was an event so rare that volcanologists place it at a VEI, volcanic explosivity index, of 7, one step below the theoretical maximum. For comparison, Mount St. Helens in 1980 was a VEI 5. Tambora was over 1,000 times more powerful. Despite this dark legacy, Tambora today is a place of immense beauty, resilience, and profound peace. The volcano sits within the protected Mount Tambora National Park, established to preserve its unique ecosystems and historical significance. The lower slopes are cloaked in dense rainforest, alive with birdsong and rare species, including endemic orchids and the elusive yellow-crested cockatoo. Higher up, the terrain shifts to montane scrub and open volcanic ridges. The summit trail is long and demanding, often requiring multiple days to complete, but the reward is unmatched. Reaching the crater rim, especially at dawn, is an experience few forget. As the first light of morning spills across the lip of the caldera, the world below slowly reveals itself, a vast, circular shadow that swallows all sound. Mist rises from the jungle within, and distant ocean views shimmer on the horizon. You can sit for hours and watch the shadows dance across the crater, as if the mountain itself is remembering. It is eerily quiet. There are no loud winds, no mechanical hums, only the occasional rustle of leaves and your own breath. It is a silence shaped by history, by fire and ash and the slow, healing hand of time. Locals in nearby villages still speak of the mountain with reverence and caution. There are legends of buried kingdoms, of lost cities entombed beneath the ash. Archaeological expeditions have, in fact, uncovered remnants of one such village, a kind of Pompeii of the East, where artifacts lie preserved beneath meters of compacted volcanic debris, frozen in the moment the mountain ended all life in its reach. These discoveries deepen the awe and the grief that Tambora inspires. What makes Gunung Tambora unreal is not just the violence of its past, but the layered beauty of its present. It is a paradox in stone and soil, the site of humanity's greatest environmental trauma, now a refuge of biodiversity and serenity. It is a place where destruction gave way to rebirth, where trees now root in ancient ash, and where the earth's rawest power sleeps beneath a veil of green. To witness Tambora is to understand that the planet does not forget, it remembers. In valleys and craters, in clouds of sulfur and tales of famine. And yet, it forgives, too. The jungle returns. The birds sing again. Life continues. But deep within the caldera, in the bones of the mountain, the memory of fire still glows. Quiet. Waiting. Eternal. Far from the towering peaks and snow-capped giants of the world's most famous mountain ranges, nestled in the sunburned landscapes of Western Australia, there lies a modest but strangely mesmerizing summit, Mount Cook. At just 582 meters, 1,909 feet, it is the highest point in the Darling Range, a rugged escarpment that stretches parallel to the southwestern coast of the continent. Compared to the Himalayas or the Andes, Mount Cook is humble in elevation. But what it lacks in altitude, it compensates for with vastness, solitude, and a kind of haunting natural beauty that makes it one of Australia's most unreal and underappreciated wild places. Mount Cook doesn't announce itself with the bravado of a jagged peak. Instead, it emerges, slowly and quietly, from the rolling bushlands of the Jarrah forest biome. From a distance, it appears as a dark, gently rounded dome rising above a sea of trees. But the closer you draw, the more its surreal subtleties become evident. Massive granite outcrops shaped by eons of erosion, twisted stunted trees clawing skyward through thin soil, and a sense of untouched wilderness that feels as if you're walking through a landscape only half awake. This sense of isolation is no accident. Mount Cook lies along one of Australia's most legendary long-distance hiking trails, the Bibbulmun Track, a 1,000-kilometre footpath that winds from Perth to Albany, passing through forests, valleys, coastal heaths, and granite peaks. The section around Mount Cook is revered by bushwalkers for its remoteness. There are no roads cutting across the summit. No chairlifts. No tourist infrastructure. What you bring, you carry. What you leave behind is only your footprints. The climb to Mount Cook summit is gentle by international standards, but deceptively wild. The trail is rough in places, hemmed in by dense eucalypt forest, where jarrah, mari, and wanda trees tower over undergrowth thick with banksias, grevilleas, and zamias, a lineage of plants so ancient they date back to the time of dinosaurs. The air is dry and fragrant, laced with the oils of the bush, and alive with the low hum of insects and the strange, melodic calls of Australian birdlife. You might hear the haunting cry of a black cockatoo, or catch the brief rustle of a wallaby darting through the brush. Every sound carries far in this vast, open quiet. As you ascend the granite flanks of Mount Cook, the vegetation thins, replaced by fields of lichen-spotted stone and clusters of wind-bent she-oaks. In the dry season, the views open up, sprawling woodlands stretching to the horizon, unbroken by roads or towns. To the untrained eye, the land might seem featureless. But to those who know the bush, it's a rich and intricate tapestry of microecosystems, each one hosting rare and often endangered species found nowhere else on Earth. One of the surreal aspects of Mount Cook is its unexpected rock formations. On the summit and along the ridgeline, you'll find scattered tors, massive granite boulders worn into strange, almost sculptural shapes by time and weather. Some resemble animal forms, others seem like monoliths left behind by some ancient culture. They stand silently, catching the reddish hues of sunset and casting long shadows in the morning light. These features have no plaques, no interpretive signs. They just exist, raw and unspoken, like the mountain itself. The summit plateau is a wide, flat expanse of stone that offers panoramic views in every direction. On clear days, you can see far across the Darling Scarp, over the forested plains, and sometimes, faintly, the glimmer of the Indian Ocean in the far west. But perhaps the most astonishing views are not the vast distances, but the intimate, overlooked details. The way mist clings to the trees after early morning rain, the shimmer of heat on the stone in summer, or the delicate wildflowers that bloom in the spring, bursts of pink, yellow, and violet erupting from cracks in the rock. Mount Cook is also part of Noongar country, and the land holds deep cultural significance for the Noongar people, the traditional owners of the southwest of Western Australia. While many stories remain private or sacred, there is a profound spiritual relationship with the land here. The mountain and the surrounding forests are seen not just as natural resources, but as living ancestors, places of story, ceremony, and memory. When you walk these trails with a quiet mind, you begin to feel what has long been understood by those who came before, that this is not just a hill in the wilderness. It is a presence, still and watching. The surrealism of Mount Cook lies in this duality. Its humble stature hides an immense depth of meaning and mystery. It is the kind of mountain that sneaks up on you, not in elevation, but in emotion. You arrive expecting a modest summit, and you leave with the impression that you've walked through something sacred, something older and more alive than your brief passage could ever disturb. In terms of biodiversity, the area around Mount Cook is an ecological treasure trove. The Darling Range is considered one of Australia's most significant conservation zones, home to rare marsupials like the quokka and western ringtail possum, as well as dozens of bird species including the striking splendid fairy wren, scarlet robin, and Australian owlet nightjar. Reptiles are common too. Bobtail skinks, dewgites, and tiger snakes thrive in the rocky outcrops and dense underbrush. The flora is equally impressive, especially in wildflower season, September to November, when entire hillsides are blanketed in color. It's a painter's dream, and a botanist's paradise. And yet, you might hike for hours and see no one. That solitude is part of Mount Cook's magic. It doesn't demand a crowd. It isn't famous in the Instagram sense. There are no ski lodges or summit cafes, no helicopter tours or glossy brochures. It is for those who seek quiet places, For those who understand that unreal does not always mean spectacular in scale. Sometimes, it means stepping into a world that hasn't changed in millennia, a place where time slows and the land holds its breath. At night, if you choose to camp near the base, the experience deepens. The stars over Mount Cook are unhindered by city light. The Milky Way stretches from horizon to horizon, and the calls of nocturnal creatures echo through the stillness. Sometimes, in the cooler months, a faint mist rises from the gullies and creeps across the forest floor, wrapping the trees in silver. It's a scene that feels far removed from the bustling modern world, primal, dreamlike, eternal. For many, Mount Cook represents something rare in today's world, a mountain without noise, without performance, without expectation. It is a place you discover quietly, and it gives itself to you slowly. The further you go, the deeper you listen, the more unreal it becomes. It is a landscape that refuses to be rushed, where the absence of spectacle becomes the spectacle itself. In a country known for its harsh deserts and iconic red monoliths, Mount Cook is a soft-spoken marvel, a granite soul hidden beneath eucalyptus shade. To walk its ridges is to walk through stillness, through silence, through ancient time. And in the end, you leave not feeling like you conquered a summit, but like you were gently invited in, shown something true, and allowed to pass through a world that is vanishingly rare, untouched, unscripted, and quietly extraordinary. In the northeastern reaches of the Korean peninsula, where the sea mists from the East Sea, Sea of Japan, roll in to meet towering cliffs, and where forests blush in the full spectrum of seasons, there rises a mountain of ancient stone and poetic legend, Mount Sirak, known locally as Siaraksan. This is not a peak that seeks to dominate by sheer elevation. It stands at a respectable but not towering 1,708 meters, 5,603 feet, at its highest point, Dicheongbong, but rather by its striking visual drama, its cultural significance, and its ethereal atmosphere that shifts with every hour, season, and footstep. Mount Sirak is often described as the most beautiful mountain in South Korea, and perhaps even the most beloved. It is part of the Taebaek mountain range, which stretches down Korea's eastern spine, and it lies within Siaraksan National Park, a vast protected region recognized as a UNESCO Biosphere Reserve. This designation is no surprise. The mountain is a crucible of biodiversity, geology, and myth, a natural cathedral sculpted by time, wind, water, and reverence. What makes Mount Sirak so surreal is its topography. From a distance, it looks like a petrified storm, a tangle of jagged granite spires, steep cliffs, and needle-like ridgelines that seem impossibly sharp against the sky. These stone fingers rise in clusters, forming labyrinthine valleys and fortress-like escarpments, each one unique in character. The rock here isn't smooth or rounded. It is ripped and twisted, like some ancient force tried to claw its way through the earth. In some places, the formations are so vertically arranged that they look like the shattered remains of a celestial city, towers broken and thrown skyward. These surreal spires are particularly breathtaking in the early morning, when fog and low-hanging clouds drift through them like ghostly rivers, giving the illusion of floating islands. During Korea's distinct four seasons, Sirak transforms utterly, a chameleon of stone and leaf. In spring, delicate pink cherry blossoms bloom in the lower valleys while the summits still hold patches of snow. Summer brings lush, emerald forests with roaring waterfalls fueled by monsoon rains. Autumn, perhaps the most famous time to visit, cloaks the entire range in fiery shades of red, orange, and gold, turning every ridgeline into a living flame. And winter silences it all under a blanket of snow and frost, turning the spires into frozen teeth of a sleeping dragon. Culturally, Mount Sirak is deeply rooted in Korean spirituality and folklore. It is dotted with ancient Buddhist temples, the most notable being Sinhyungsa Temple, located near the entrance of the national park. Sinhyungsa is home to a massive bronze statue of Buddha, the Tungil Debel, which stands in silent contemplation as mountains rise behind it. Built as a symbol of hope and unification, the statue seems perfectly placed, a human gesture of peace in the shadow of nature's sublime power. Monks still live and practice in the temple, and the faint sound of gongs and chanting sometimes drifts up into the forests, mingling with the wind and bird calls. There's a duality to Mount Sirak that enhances its dreamlike quality. On one side, the more developed Sirak-dong area near the city of Sokcho. You find cable cars, trail networks, and lodges that welcome hikers and tourists from around the world. The Gwanjeom-seong Fortress Trail, reached by cable car and a short hike, offers stunning views of the granite spires and the ocean beyond. From this angle, Sirak is awe-inspiring but relatively accessible, a mountain dressed up for guests. But the inner regions, especially Sirak, Outer Sirak, and Ne Sirak, Inner Sirak, are wilder, more remote, and deeply primal. Trails like the Dichorngbong Peak ascent require a full-day commitment and test even experienced hikers. These areas are marked by dense forests, icy river crossings, and precarious climbs over exposed stone ledges. The further in you go, the more the human world disappears. You find yourself walking through deep gorges carved by glacial melt, past caves of myth, and across bridges suspended over canyons where waterfalls thunder far below. The silence is intense. Even in peak seasons, you can walk for hours and hear nothing but your heartbeat and the distant rush of water. And yet, despite the grandeur and remoteness, Sirak is gentle in its silence. It doesn't roar like Tambora or tower like Robson. It invites reflection. Korean poets and philosophers have long drawn inspiration from its shapes and moods. For many, it represents the essence of Han, a uniquely Korean emotional concept that blends sorrow, beauty, endurance, and quiet resilience. To sit on a granite ledge beneath a wind-sculpted pine tree, watching fog roll in over the spires, is to feel something ancient stir inside you. It's as if the mountain remembers every step, every prayer, every moment of solitude. The wildlife here adds to the sense of untouched nature. Siberian roe deer, musk deer, and even the elusive Asian black bear, moon bear, roam the deeper forests. Overhead, hawks and eagles glide between the cliffs, while smaller birds, tits, flycatchers, and woodpeckers dart through the underbrush. The rivers are home to rare fish species, and the mountain hosts thousands of plant varieties, many of them endemic. The deeper you explore, the more you realize that Sirak isn't just a mountain. It's an ark, a living sanctuary that has survived the rapid modernization of the Korean peninsula. Even the weather here feels alive. Clouds form and dissipate with uncanny speed, one moment revealing the sharp skyline of granite peaks, and the next swallowing everything in a soft white silence. Rain comes without warning, sweeping up valleys and drenching the stone in color. Lightning flashes between spires in summer storms, while frost crawls slowly over the pines in winter. Every condition brings new perspectives, new moods, as if the mountain is performing a slow, eternal play, never repeating a scene in exactly the same way. For those who reach Dichorngbong Peak, the highest point, the reward is a panoramic view that defies explanation. You stand above the clouds, often alone, watching the spine of the Taebaek Range disappear into mist. To the East Sea glimmers, a horizontal mirror to the vertical drama behind you. It is a moment that feels detached from the ordinary, the air thinner, the wind colder, and the world somehow more honest. Hikers often leave simple cairns or pause in silent respect. There is no need to speak. Sirak speaks for you. What makes Mount Sirak truly unreal is how it combines the extremes of landscape, culture, and feeling. It is not merely a hike or a photo opportunity. It is a place that asks something of you. It asks for patience, for reverence, for the willingness to see subtlety and shadow as forms of majesty. In a world obsessed with height, scale, and spectacle, Sirak offers a different kind of grandeur, one measured in texture, tone, and time slowed to the rhythm of clouds. To walk Sirak's trails, to rest under its twisted pines and touch its weathered stone, is to brush against something older than myth, deeper than history. It does not need to be explained. It only needs to be felt. And once it has entered your soul, it never quite leaves. In the heart of the high Atlas Mountains of Morocco, where dry winds sweep down from the Sahara and Berber villages cling like stone swallows to the cliffs, there rises a mountain whose silence speaks with the voice of the earth itself. Mount Toubkal, the highest peak in North Africa at 4,167 meters, 13,671 feet. Most know it as a popular summit, a goal for trekkers eager to conquer a peak that, while challenging, is accessible enough to be reached by those with determination. But beyond the well-worn paths and group tours lies a route far less traveled, more remote, more demanding, and infinitely more surreal, the north ridge of Mount Toubkal. This is not the side of the mountain that guides recommend to beginners. It is not advertised on glossy brochures or plastered across the social media accounts of tour operators. The North Ridge is for those who seek the raw mountain, not the mountain as a trophy, but as a confrontation. as a place where stone, snow, and sky merge into something elemental and wild. The North Ridge route begins not from the bustling trailheads near Imlil, the mountain's most popular access point, but rather from the remote valleys to the north, such as Tazagat or Tizi and Tashaddirt. These are landscapes where the walls close in tightly, and where the paths are not always marked. Here, mules carry supplies the old-fashioned way, and Berber shepherds guide their flocks up slopes so steep they appear almost vertical. The journey to the ridge is long before it even begins, and the higher you climb, the more the world below vanishes into the haze of memory. Unlike the standard southern ascent, which follows a rocky but manageable scree trail up from the Toubkal refuge, the North Ridge is jagged, technical, and deeply intimate. The terrain shifts from boulder-strewn plateaus to narrow ledges and exposed spines of fractured granite. In places, hands are needed as much as feet. The air grows thinner with each step, and the silence deepens. There are no crowds here, no conga line of summit hopefuls. Often, there is no one. Just the sound of wind rasping over stone, and the slow, deliberate crunch of boot on gravel. The ridge itself stretches like the backbone of a sleeping beast, a serrated line of rock that dips and rises in rhythmic procession toward the summit. From this side, Toubkal reveals its less forgiving face, not the friendly challenge of a peak well-trod, but the wildness that came before. The rock is sharp and brittle in places, weathered by centuries of exposure to fierce sun and freezing nights. There are patches of snow even in the summer months, tucked into shaded gullies and icy corners, stubborn remnants of the mountain's breath. But the reward for this rawness is a kind of scenic purity unmatched anywhere else in the range. From the ridge, you can see across the full sweep of the Atlas Mountains, a rolling, endless sea of peaks and passes, many of them unnamed, all of them untouched. The light in this part of the world is different, clearer, harsher, and yet more golden, like something scraped clean by desert winds. The clouds move slowly, if they appear at all. The air is dry and crisp, and smells faintly of dust and iron. In the distance, the sands of the Sahara shimmer like a mirage, reminding you that this is Africa, and the frontier is never far. One of the most unreal aspects of the North Ridge route is its complete isolation from modernity. There is no cell signal here. No huts. No noise save the occasional call of an eagle or the clatter of a dislodged stone falling into the abyss. This is a realm of vertical solitude, where the mountain accepts your presence but offers no comfort. It demands everything: focus, endurance, humility, and in return, it offers not achievement, but perspective. Near the top of the ridge, the path narrows into knife-edge traverses, with exposure on both sides. The views are dizzying, not just because of the altitude, but because of the sheer scale. The land falls away into valleys so deep they seem bottomless. Far below, the Asif N8 Mizane Valley winds like a silver thread through rust-colored rock, dotted with terraces and goat paths. Above, the summit block of Toubkal looms not as a destination, but as a monument, stark and silent, the crown of the Atlas. Reaching the summit from the North Ridge is a culmination not just of physical effort, but of mental stillness. There are no summit signs here, no flags flapping in the wind. Just a weathered cairn, a few scattered rocks, and the kind of view that unfolds inward as much as outward. From here, the full width of Morocco spreads beneath you, from the snowy caps of the Middle Atlas to the shimmering horizon of the desert. You can see the anti-Atlas mountains far to the south, and on especially clear days, even the glint of the Atlantic Ocean. Culturally, this landscape is woven with Berber heritage, and the mountain holds a spiritual weight beyond its physical height. To the Amazigh, Berber people, the mountains are not just geography, they are living entities, storied and sacred. Legends speak of spirits that dwell in the rocks, of jinn that haunt the passes, of wise men and hermits who found enlightenment in caves along these slopes. Even today, you'll find rock cairns wrapped with colored cloth, left as offerings. You might come across an old shrine, a marabout's tomb, perched precariously among the cliffs, a marker of faith carved into the wilderness. The name Toubkal is thought to derive from the Amazigh words meaning to look high or to watch from above, and that is precisely what it feels like, a high watchtower above the world, a place where the earth curves just slightly, and the sky seems closer than it has any right to be. Descending from the North Ridge, particularly if you return by a different, more traveled path, is a kind of spiritual re-entry. The noise creeps back in, voices, footsteps, the distant bark of a shepherd's dog. You pass back into the realm of trail markers and guidebooks. But the memory of the ridge lingers. It stays with you not because of the challenge, but because of the purity of its silence, the sharpness of its rock, and the absolute authenticity of a mountain that has never asked to be admired, only understood. Mount Toubkal's North Ridge is not for everyone. It is not curated. It is not forgiving. But for those willing to walk it with open eyes and quiet respect, it is one of the most unreal and humbling paths on earth. It is a place where North Africa reveals its most ancient self, stripped of ornament, bathed in sun, crowned in silence. Where the vast, rolling prairies of Alberta meet the craggy beginnings of the Canadian Rockies, there stands a mountain that seems less like a formation of earth and more like a stone gate, a vertical proclamation that the wilderness beyond is about to begin. This is Mount Yamnuska, a relatively modest peak by Canadian standards at 2,240 meters, 7,349 feet, in elevation, yet undeniably one of the most striking and surreal landmarks in all of Western Canada. Also known by its traditional Nakoda, stony, name Yamnuthka, meaning flat-faced mountain, it rises dramatically out of the foothills like a shattered blade, its steep limestone cliffs and serrated ridgelines etched permanently against the sky. Mount Yamnuska doesn't ease you into the mountains, it announces them. Towering above the Bow Valley, just an hour west of Calgary, it marks the very eastern edge of the Canadian Rockies. To stand at its base and gaze up at its sheer, light grey wall of limestone is to be confronted by the physical memory of geologic upheaval. These rocks were once ancient seabeds, layers of sediment deposited over hundreds of millions of years, that were eventually thrust upwards and eastward in the tectonic chaos that built the Rockies during the Laramide orogeny. Today, they form an awe-inspiring 800-meter vertical face that dominates the skyline and draws climbers, hikers, artists, and philosophers alike. Despite its height not rivaling the loftier peaks farther west, Mount Yamnuska is one of the most photogenic and psychologically impactful summits in the region. The drama of its form, standing isolated and apart from its neighboring summits, gives it an iconic silhouette, instantly recognizable from Highway 1A and the Trans-Canada Highway. The mountain's profile is especially haunting in the golden light of late afternoon, when shadows stretch long across the foothills and the cliff face catches the last rays of the sun, glowing faintly like a wall of iron turned to amber. Yet the surreal qualities of Mount Yamnuska go far beyond its aesthetics. It offers one of the most unique hiking and scrambling experiences in the Canadian Rockies. The standard route around the mountain forms a loop, beginning with a pleasant forested ascent that lulls many into underestimating what comes next. After passing through dense spruce and aspen, the trail begins to climb steeply along the ridgeline, eventually emerging into a realm of wind, rock, and void. Atop the east-west trending ridge, the world drops away on either side. To the north, the flat farmland of Alberta spreads endlessly toward the horizon. To the south and west, the jagged teeth of the Rockies begin in earnest, row after row of peaks marching toward British Columbia. But most gripping is the presence of the vertical drop just meters away from the trail. The famed scramble route along the ridgeline brings hikers dangerously close to the edge, where a single misstep could prove fatal. There are sections requiring confident hands and nerves of steel, especially the infamous traverse along a narrow ledge, exposed and airy, yet breathtakingly beautiful. For those with a background in rock climbing, Yamnuska's limestone face offers some of the best traditional and sport climbing routes in Canada. The cliffs here are storied and legendary. Dozens of multi-pitch routes climb its vertical surface, with names like Chockstone Corner, Bullrog, and Devil's Right Hand. For decades, this wall has served as a testing ground for climbers, a proving arena where ambition meets stone. Some of Canada's most famous alpinists cut their teeth here, and it remains a rite of passage for serious climbers. The sensation of being on that cliff, suspended hundreds of meters above the treetops with the wind howling through the gaps, is nothing short of otherworldly. But not all of Mount Yamnuska's allure lies in risk and verticality. The mountain also harbors hidden groves, wildflower meadows, and fossils, reminders of the ocean life that once flourished here. Brachiopods, trilobites, and other ancient sea creatures are often visible embedded in the limestone if one looks closely enough. It's a stunning juxtaposition, standing on the edge of a cliff in the Canadian Rockies, surrounded by alpine flora, and discovering imprints of creatures that lived under warm, shallow seas hundreds of millions of years ago. Yamnuska is also deeply woven into indigenous culture and history. The Stoney Nakoda people, whose ancestral lands encompass this region, regard the mountain as sacred. The name Iyamnathka reflects the mountain's distinctive form and holds meaning that transcends physical description. The area is rich in oral traditions, legends, and teachings passed down through generations. Stories that remain private to the community, but whose spiritual gravity can be felt even by outsiders who approach the mountain with humility and respect. One of the most powerful elements of Mount Yamnuska is its liminality, its location between worlds. It is not fully alpine, yet not purely prairie. It is a borderland mountain, a geological threshold where the plains meet the peaks. You feel this when you stand at the summit and see the radical contrast between two ecosystems. To the east, rolling grasslands and open skies. To the west, jagged ridges and ice-capped summits. This visual dichotomy stirs something deep and archetypal, the sense of leaving the known for the unknown, of crossing into a different realm. Weather here changes rapidly, often violently. A bright, sunny morning can dissolve into a howling storm in less than an hour, with rain, sleet, and lightning crashing down over the ridgeline. It's not uncommon for hikers to be turned back by sudden squalls or fog banks that swallow the mountain whole. The wind is a constant companion, whispering through the trees on the ascent, screaming across the exposed face at the summit. There's a wildness here that resists domestication, a raw and living energy that reminds you the mountain is not yours, you are simply passing through. At sunset, Mount Yamnuska becomes an altar of light and shadow. The wind stills. The granite begins to cool. Long, golden rays cut across the cliffs, igniting the rock in hues of copper and violet. The valley below turns to a muted canvas of blue and silver. It is a deeply emotional experience. Not flashy, not explosive, but profound in its stillness. Many have described it as a place of personal transformation, where burdens are lifted and clarity arrives like mountain air. Mount Yamnuska may not be the tallest or most remote mountain in Canada, but it stands apart in spirit. It is a gateway, both literal and symbolic. It represents the transition from comfort to challenge, from the familiar to the unknown, from civilization to wilderness. For the indigenous peoples of the region, for climbers and hikers, for wanderers and seekers, Yamnuska is not just a formation of stone, it is a mirror, reflecting back whatever you bring with you, fear, courage, or humility. To walk its trails or cling to its cliffs is to be changed, even if just a little. And as you descend back into the forests, with the shadow of the cliff now behind you and the echo of wind still in your ears, you carry a piece of that wild edge inside you, a reminder that there are places where the world still speaks in stone, and where listening means daring to stand close to the edge. In the golden heart of Northern California, where rolling oak-studded hills meet sun-baked valleys and the sky often stretches endlessly above parched earth, a mountain rises not in violent eruption nor glacial majesty, but as an ancient sentinel of time and view, Mount Diawolo. At 3,849 feet, 1,173 meters, it's not the tallest peak in the state, not even close, yet it commands a panoramic spectacle that few mountains in the world can match. Here, height is deceptive, and perception is everything. From its summit, one can witness a sweep of terrain so broad and detailed that on the clearest days, the curve of the earth itself becomes visible. And when the fog rolls in, something far stranger occurs. Cloud inversions that transform the landscape into a sea of mist and memory. Located in Contra Costa County, just east of San Francisco Bay, Mount Diawolo is a geographic, geologic, and cultural landmark of mythic proportion, despite its modest elevation. It stands at the center of Mount Diawolo State Park, a rugged preserve of chaparral, woodland, and exposed sandstone outcrops. Unlike the granite guardians of the Sierra Nevada or the volcanic titans of the Cascades, Diawolo's essence is subtle and psychological. Not a wall to be climbed, but a world to be contemplated. Approaching Mount Diawolo, especially from the west, its peak appears deceptively small. This is because the surrounding land lies at relatively low elevations, and the mountain rises from near sea level, giving it a prominence of over 3,100 feet, making it one of the most topographically prominent mountains in the continental United States. This geological prominence is part of why its summit view is so legendary. The Mount Diawolo view shed, as geographers call it, is one of the widest uninterrupted panoramas on the planet. On perfectly clear days, observers at the summit can see parts of over 40 counties, stretching across California to Mount Lassen, the Sierra Nevada, Yosemite's peaks, Half Dome, and even, with extraordinary clarity, the snow-capped Mount Shasta, more than 180 miles to the north. But Mount Diawolo is no ordinary observatory. Its summit, ringed by rust-colored cliffs and patches of scrubby manzanita, hosts the historic summit building, constructed in the 1930s by the Civilian Conservation Corps. This rough stone structure blends into the landscape like something carved from the mountain itself. It houses the original summit beacon, used for air navigation before the invention of modern radar, now ceremoniously lit only once a year, on Pearl Harbor Day, as a tribute to fallen aviators. Yet the true surrealism of Mount Diawolo begins not in daylight, but at dawn, and most hauntingly, during the colder months. When the marine layer fog from the Pacific Ocean pushes inland and settles in the low valleys surrounding the mountain, the peak rises above the clouds in a surreal inversion of landscape. From above, it appears as if the world has turned to cloud and sea, and the mountain has become an island, a stony archipelago floating in a foamy white ocean. The sense of detachment from the everyday world is total. All of the Bay Area, its cities, highways, and noise, disappears beneath the waves of mist. What remains is the timeless serenity of stone, sky, and wind. This phenomenon, known as a temperature inversion, is common in Diawolo's region during winter and spring mornings. Cold air is trapped near the surface beneath a layer of warm air, holding fog and pollution in the lower valleys while the upper slopes bask in crisp, crystal-clear sunshine. It's an eerie and transcendent experience to hike through the fog, climbing trails that twist through oak forests and sandstone ravines, only to break through the cloud layer into sudden light, as though you've climbed from one reality into another. The trails leading to the summit are rich with this type of transformation. Starting in lowland grasslands dotted with grazing deer and clusters of blue oak, hikers ascend through shifting ecological zones, each defined by light, temperature, and plant life. Chaparral gives way to dense patches of grey pine, and the air begins to carry the scent of wild sage and hot stone. Birds become companions along the route, red-tailed hawks, turkey vultures, and, increasingly in recent years, peregrine falcons use the mountain's cliffs as perches for scanning the valleys below. From nearly every point on Mount Diawolo's flanks, the views are staggering. Look west, and the Golden Gate Bridge, cloaked in fog or shining in sun, hangs like a thread across the blue of San Francisco Bay. Look east, and the Central Valley stretches flat and endless, its quilt of farmland reaching the feet of the distant Sierra. Turn south and north, and the ridges and folds of the Diawolo Range flow like frozen waves, rising and falling in hues of ochre and olive. Geologically, Mount Diawolo is a storybook in stone, a place where multiple tectonic plates have smashed, folded, and uplifted sedimentary layers in a chaotic tapestry of faults and fossils. Its rocks contain marine fossils from the Jurassic and Cretaceous periods, evidence that these formations once lay on ancient sea floors before they were shoved skyward by the grinding collision of the North American and Pacific plates. The entire mountain is a tectonic anomaly, a structural anticline, shaped not by volcanic eruption but by the Earth slowly crumpling and squeezing upward over eons. But Mount Diawolo is more than a peak. It is a symbol, one that has permeated Native American cosmology and colonial history alike. To the Miwok and Ohlone tribes, it was a sacred mountain, a place of creation and spiritual power. Several origin myths center around it, including beliefs that the mountain was the birthplace of the world or the home of ancestral spirits. The name Diawolo, Spanish for devil, is itself a colonial distortion, a misinterpretation of indigenous narratives of spirit and mystery. European settlers, fearing what they did not understand, imposed a label that stuck, even though the mountain's true essence is far more nuanced, sacred, and misunderstood. Today, Mount Diawolo remains a paradox. It lies at the edge of one of the most densely populated and technologically advanced regions of North America, yet it offers a complete sensory escape into ancient terrain. Hikers, cyclists, artists, and mystics alike ascend it not only for the physical challenge, but to witness a 360-degree theater of time and terrain. In spring, its slopes burst into bloom, lupine, Indian paintbrush, and golden poppies carpeting the ridges. In fall, its oaks ignite in russet and gold. And in winter, the rare snowfall dusts its summit in white, a strange and fleeting sight in the Californian sun. Mount Diawolo's surreal magic is not in its extremity, but in its contrast. It is a summit of reflection as much as sight. It defies expectation. It offers more than just a vista, it offers a moment suspended between worlds, where land and sky become inseparable, where distance collapses into clarity, and where the ordinary becomes sublime. To stand at its summit during a cloud inversion is to feel, however briefly, that you have left the world below. And when you descend, you return changed, as if the mountain whispered something you weren't quite meant to hear, but now can never forget. High above the shimmering fjords of western Norway, where water cuts deep into the land like silver blades and mountains rise in vertical majesty from sea level to sky, there stands a solitary giant with a crown of stone and snow, Mount Skalla. At 1,848 meters, 6,063 feet, it's not the tallest peak in Norway, nor even in the region of Vestland, but what it lacks in global notoriety, it more than makes up for in raw, almost mythic presence. Skalla is a mountain of quiet drama, one that stirs something ancestral in the heart. Towering cliffs, plunging views over fjords, and, perhaps most surreal of all, a lonely stone tower at its summit, known as Skallatornet, which stands like a fortress on the roof of the world. Skalla is located just outside the picturesque village of Lund, nestled in the Nordfjord region, a place already famed for its glacier-fed lakes, emerald valleys, and ancient farming hamlets. But Skalla isn't a gentle hill or a casual stroll through alpine meadows. It rises with relentless steepness, beginning virtually at sea level and ascending almost 2 vertical kilometers in one continuous, leg-burning climb. This makes Skalla one of the most prominent ascents in Scandinavia, and a coveted summit for serious hikers and adventurers. The hike begins near Lernvatnet, a mirror-like lake cradled between towering cliffs and forested slopes, its waters a surreal turquoise from glacial silt. From there, the trail wastes no time. A stone-paved path, built in the late 19th century with remarkable craftsmanship, begins the long, winding journey upward. This old road, known as the Skalla Trail, was constructed as a therapeutic hiking route, part of a movement in Norway that saw physical activity in the mountains as a cure for melancholy and nervous disorders. In fact, the very tower atop the mountain, that iconic stone hut, was originally built in 1891 for this very purpose, a sanatorium for the mentally ill and weary of spirit. The idea was visionary, if a little eccentric. What better way to restore the soul than to climb through mist and mountain air, leaving the worries of the lowlands behind? The concept feels more relevant than ever in today's frantic world. And yet, when you make the climb, the ascent is anything but clinical. It is epic, deeply immersive, and almost spiritual. The trail twists through dense birch forests, where moss clings to every rock and rivulets of water trickle over roots. In early summer, wildflowers bloom between stones, and the air carries the scent of damp earth and mountain herbs. As you rise above the tree line, the view begins to explode outward, revealing the serpentine sweep of the fjord below, flanked by vertical cliffs that dive into the water like colossal blades. Further up, the landscape becomes austere and glacial, with snow patches lingering well into the summer months, and the wind biting at your skin even on clear days. Then, at last, after hours of climbing, the stone tower appears, stark and surreal, like a lighthouse in the sky. Skallatornet is unlike anything else in Norway. Constructed from grey, round stone in a perfect cylinder, its walls are nearly a meter thick, built to withstand the fierce alpine storms that sweep the summit. The tower rises 3 stories, with slit-like windows and a spiral wooden staircase inside. It sleeps about 20 people, making it one of the highest overnight accommodations in Scandinavia, a place where climbers can spend the night in silence and solitude, high above the world. The views from the summit are not just panoramic, they are vertiginous, overwhelming, and strangely hypnotic. On a clear day, you can see across the Lodalen Valley, with its lush green carpet of farms and meadows, all the way to the ice masses of Jostedalsbreen, the largest glacier in mainland Europe. To the west, the Nordfjord gleams like polished steel, its surface so calm it reflects the sky. But often, clouds roll in from below, wrapping the valley in a blanket of white while the summit remains in sun, creating the unforgettable sensation of standing on an island above the clouds, surrounded by nothing but blue sky and stone. The cloud inversions here are famous, especially in autumn and spring. You wake in the stone tower, open the wooden door, and step out into a realm of silence. The clouds roil and drift below like a boiling sea, hiding the entire world. It feels like you are alone on Earth, perched on the last rock above the void. Skalla is not just a place of natural beauty. It has become a cultural icon in Norwegian mountaineering. Every year, the mountain hosts the Skalla OPP, a grueling mountain race where athletes run from the fjord to the summit, a vertical marathon through heaven and hell. But beyond the athleticism, Scala is revered for its unique character, a mountain that blends the serene with the savage, the architectural with the elemental. There's something deeply poetic about Scala. It is a place where human presence is minimal but meaningful. The tower doesn't conquer the mountain, it honors it. It's a rare example of architecture that feels in dialogue with nature, rather than imposed upon it. On stormy nights, winds scream across the summit, and the stones of the tower creak like a wooden ship in high seas. You lie in your bunk, wrapped in wool, listening to the mountain's breath, ancient, unchanging, and entirely indifferent to your presence. The solitude is intense. There is no electricity, no signal, no hum of civilization. Just the sound of wind and the faint ticking of your own heartbeat. Scala asks something of you: to be still, to be quiet, to be present. It is the kind of mountain that draws introverts, thinkers, and those weary of the crowded peaks of more popular ranges. Here, you find not only height, but depth, a silence so total it begins to echo. In winter, Scala transforms again. The snow comes deep and fast, and the climb becomes a technical expedition for experienced ski mountaineers. The slopes are dangerous with avalanche risk, but they also offer some of the most exhilarating backcountry skiing in Europe. The tower, half buried in snow, looks like something out of a Norse legend, a frozen bastion above a forgotten world. Legends do cling to the mountain. Some locals believe the tower was never meant for therapy, but for defense, or perhaps as a monument to endurance. There are tales of people seeing lights on the summit during storms, when no one was there. The mountain has a loneliness that feels alive, like an old soul remembering when glacier covered the valleys and reindeer roamed the ridgelines. What makes Scala unreal is not just its location or its view, it's the perfect balance of wildness and welcome, isolation and intimacy. You ascend through every layer of landscape, from village to forest to tundra to snow, and at the top, rather than emptiness, you find a circle of stone, a hearth against the sky. It is a mountain that holds space for humans, without yielding its power. You don't conquer Scala, you enter its presence, and if you're lucky, you're allowed to stay a while. To sit beside the stone tower at sunrise, sipping coffee from a tin cup as golden light spills across a world still asleep under cloud, is to touch a kind of quiet ecstasy. It's not adrenaline. It's not achievement. It's something more rare, a moment outside time, on a mountain that has stood longer than memory and will remain long after we're gone. Far in the northern reaches of India's Ladakh region, where the land lies baked in silence and etched in wind, a kingdom of rock and sky unfolds beyond the human scale. Here, amid an otherworldly realm of high-altitude deserts and lunar valleys, rises a mountain that is both graceful and commanding, Kangyatsy II. Standing at 6,250 meters, 20,505 feet, it is the lesser summit of the twin-peaked Kangyatsy Massif, but no less majestic. With its wide shoulders, sweeping snowfields, and ridgelines sharp as drawn swords, Kangyatsy II is a pure embodiment of Himalayan elegance, accessible enough to climb yet wild enough to remain steeped in awe and remoteness. The Marka Valley, a place whispered about in the circles of trekkers and spiritual seekers alike, is the gateway to this mountain. It's a world that feels removed from time, where narrow trails meander through whitewashed villages, Buddhist stupas stand like frozen prayers, and herds of blue sheep silently graze on the sparse grasses of the plateau. The journey to Kangyatsy II begins long before you lace up your boots. It begins in Leh, the capital of Ladakh, where oxygen is already thin and the mountains crowd the skyline like stone guardians. From there, trekkers enter the Hemis National Park, a protected expanse of barren ridges, turquoise rivers, and canyons so dry and cracked they resemble the bones of the earth itself. The air is so clean it stings your lungs, and the silence, save for the wind, is total. Kangyatsy II gradually reveals itself through the course of the trek, often glimpsed from afar as a spectral pyramid rising above lower brown hills. It seems unreachable at first, a mirage of ice and light, but as the days unfold, it draws nearer, until one morning, you wake in Nimmerling, the high pastureland beneath its southern face, and there it is, full, massive, and absolutely unreal. Unlike its sibling Kangyatsy I, a more technical peak requiring advanced mountaineering skills, Kangyatsy II is often considered a trekking peak, though this designation hardly captures its scale or demands. The climb is high-altitude mountaineering in every sense. Glacier travel, steep ascents, whether that changes without warning, and the ever-present test of endurance in thin air. But it is also doable for the determined and well-acclimatized, a summit where the only barrier is your own will and respect for the mountain's rhythm. The route begins with a slow approach across grassy moraines and yak trails, weaving past prayer stones and glacial streams that cut the silence with their chatter. Above 5,000 meters, the landscape empties. No vegetation grows. No birds sing. The world turns to grey shale, shifting scree, and patches of wind-hardened snow. The sky darkens into a blue so deep it feels bottomless, and the sun burns with an intensity only found at high altitudes. Nights at base camp are cold, crystalline, and utterly still. The Milky Way arcs over your tent like a frozen river of stars. The ascent of Kang-Yatsi 2 is usually attempted before dawn. Climbers rise at 1 or 2 a.m., bundling in layers, clicking on headlamps, and setting off into the darkness. The early hours are brutal. Your body protests, your breath comes shallow, and the slope rises endlessly into night. But slowly, as the sky lightens, something miraculous happens. The ridgelines begin to glow. The surrounding peaks, Stok Kangri, Dizo Jongo, and far-off Nunkuan, emerge from the gloom like sleeping titans. The sunrise on Kang-Yatsi 2 is beyond description, an eruption of color and shadow, with the peaks painted gold and the valleys still lost in icy shade. The final push to the summit is the most surreal, a narrow ridge that curves gently toward the summit cone. Here, you walk on a knife edge of snow, with steep drops on either side and nothing but the wind for company. The Himalayas stretch in every direction, layer upon layer of raw, untouched wilderness, with glacier flowing between them like slow rivers of light. There are no buildings, no villages, no infrastructure, just the vast, ancient skeleton of Asia laid bare. And then, you reach it, the summit. No flags, no markers, just the crunch of snow underfoot and the stunned silence of those who made it. From 6,250 meters, the view is both humbling and expansive. To the north lies the Karakoram, shrouded in haze and mystery. To the south and west, the Zanskar Range cuts across the horizon like saw teeth. Every direction offers silence, majesty, and the feeling that you've stood at the roof of a forgotten world. But Kang-Yatsi 2's surreal nature is not just about altitude. It is about context. This is a peak that rises not from forests or glacier, but from one of the highest cold deserts on Earth. The contrast is staggering, from the arid moonscapes of Ladakh to the icy summit of a Himalayan giant in just a matter of days. Few mountains offer such rapid, poetic transformation. Few places remind you so sharply of your smallness, and your place in a much older, grander story. Culturally, the region surrounding Kang-Yatsi 2 is steeped in Tibetan Buddhist tradition. The mountain itself is often seen as sacred by locals, though not in the formal sense of a pilgrimage peak like Kailash. Yet its presence is venerated in quiet ways. Prayer flags flutter at base camp, yak herders whisper mantras as they pass beneath it, and monks from nearby gompas occasionally venture into its shadow for silent retreats. The mountain seems to absorb all of this, the chants, the awe, the breathless reverence, and radiates it back through wind and stillness. There is also the solitude. Even now, Kang-Yatsi 2 remains largely uncrowded, especially compared to other trekking peaks in the Himalayas like Island Peak or Labuch East. This means that when you climb in near total isolation. You might see a handful of others. You might summit alone. And that aloneness makes the experience deeply internal, reflective, a kind of meditation in motion. Descending is a different kind of surreal. As you make your way down from the ice and wind, the world below begins to fill again with color, sound, and scent. The oxygen thickens. The birds return. The valleys come alive. You pass again through Nimmerling, where marmots peek from rocky burrows and horses graze among the stone cairns. The mountain remains behind you, distant but visible, its face calm, unreadable, eternal. Climbing Kang-Yatsi 2 is not just an adventure. It is an initiation. Into altitude. Into emptiness. Into beauty so unfiltered it can bruise the soul. It's a reminder that some places on Earth are not meant to be conquered, only entered with humility and left with gratitude. In a world of noise, traffic, and digital ghosts, Kang-Yatsi 2 is one of the last places that truly feels untouched. A mountain where the sky comes closer, the earth speaks louder, and for a few precious hours, you remember what it is to be small and free and completely alive. In the northeastern reaches of Italy, where craggy peaks cut the sky like a cathedral of stone and where centuries of human presence have folded themselves gently into the terrain, there stands a mountain. That looms not merely in height, but in myth, Monte Civetta. Part of the legendary Dolomites, a UNESCO World Heritage Site and geological masterpiece, Civetta is often called La Parrot del Pareti, the Wall of Walls, a name it earns with every acre of its vast, vertical limestone face. Rising to 3,220 meters, 10,564 feet, Monte Civetta is not just a peak. It is a presence, monumental, looming, and eerily silent, watching over the alpine valleys below like a sleeping titan carved in white. What makes Monte Civetta so surreal is not simply its beauty, though it has that in abundance, but the sheer abruptness with which it asserts itself. From certain angles, it appears as though the earth has been cleaved open, and the guts of stone have been raised skyward in defiance of gravity and time. The northwest face, in particular, is a monstrous wall of nearly 1,200 meters, 3,900 feet, a vertical expanse of pale grey limestone streaked with ancient runoff and the shadows of gullies. It is among the largest sheer rock faces in the Dolomites and ranks as one of the most dramatic in all of Europe, a surreal curtain of stone that rises without pause from gentle alpine meadows. Below the Great Wall lies a verdant land of meadows, larch forests, and rolling green hills, dotted with shepherd huts and wooden chalets that seem stolen from a fairy tale. This contrast, the soft pastoral peace of the lower slopes and the unyielding ferocity of the upper massif, creates a visual and emotional tension that few mountains offer. Civetta is a mountain of split personalities, both inviting and impenetrable, warm and cruel. The area surrounding Monte Civetta is known as the Zoldo Valley, a region rich in both geological marvels and deep human heritage. Trails crisscross the foothills, threading through villages like Aleph, Listolade, and Pekel, where life proceeds at a slower, more contemplative pace. Yet the mountain is never far from sight, looming above every church steeple and field, its crags catching fire in the alpenglow, a deep orange radiance that turns the stone into molten flame each evening. Monte Civetta is a mecca for climbers and mountaineers, particularly those drawn to high drama and historical legacy. Its northwest face, that immense vertical wall, has seen some of the most legendary ascents in alpinism. In the early 20th century, climbers such as Emilio Comici and Riccardo Cassin ventured onto its unforgiving surfaces, establishing routes that pushed the very concept of human ability against nature's limits. Comici's infamous Via Comici, for instance, is a line that carves straight up the heart of the wall, requiring a delicate dance of precision and nerve along fissures and chimneys that seem less sculpted than scarred. The surreal quality of climbing Monte Civetta is not just physical, it is psychological. The vastness of the wall, its cold indifference, its ancient memory, all of this presses down on the climber like an invisible weight. The stone here is pale, brittle, and fossil-rich, made of ancient coral reefs uplifted from the tropical seas of the Triassic, frozen in time and altitude. You touch the rock and touch 240 million years of geological history, silent and watchful. Even for those not scaling the cliffs, the mountain offers journeys of profound immersion. The Alta Via 1, a long-distance trekking trail that threads through the Dolomites, skirts close to Civetta's flanks, offering hikers jaw-dropping views of the massif. In summer, the meadows below the mountain burst with wildflowers, blue gentians, yellow arnica, purple orchids, their colors dancing in the alpine breeze. Marmots whistle from rocky outcrops. Eagles spiral in the thermals. The air smells of pine and snow melt. Then there's the Refugio Tissi, a mountain hut perched on a high shoulder across from the Great Wall. To sit here, at dusk, with a bowl of steaming polenta and a glass of red wine, watching Civetta blaze under the last rays of the sun, is to feel utterly humbled. The face of the mountain catches every shift in light, transforming from ivory to rose to blood orange to steel grey as the day fades. Clouds cling to the peaks like torn silk. Storms brew fast, often rushing over the massif with a drama that seems lifted from myth, thunder reverberating off the cliffs like ancient drums. In winter, the mood changes again. The ski slopes of the Civetta region, part of the larger Dolomiti superski area, become a playground for snow lovers, but the high walls above remain largely untouched. Snow creeps into the gullies and hangs precariously on ledges, casting long shadows in the winter light. The mountain becomes quieter, more introspective, cloaked in white and mystery. Legends surround Monte Civetta like mist. Its very name is wrapped in folklore, Susitna means owl in Italian, and local stories tell of strange owl-like cries echoing off the cliffs at night, or of eyes glowing in the rocks during storms. Some say the mountain was cursed by gods or haunted by the ghosts of old climbers who vanished into its shadows. Others claim it watches, not malevolently, but indifferently, as if aware of its own role in a landscape where human life is fleeting and stone is forever. For artists and poets, Susitna has long been a muse. The painter Titian, who lived not far from the Dolomites, was said to have drawn inspiration from these mountains. Writers from Italy and beyond have tried to capture Susitna's essence in verse, but always fall short. Because Susitna is not something you describe. It's something you feel, a force, a shadow, a silence that stretches wider than the sky. What makes Susitna so profoundly surreal is how it feels larger than real life, yet never alien. It's not some Martian landscape or otherworldly form. It's Earth, but turned up, intensified, dramatized. It reminds you that this planet still holds untamed theaters of grandeur, where the sky and stone collide in operatic scale. And yet, despite its intimidating face, Monte Susitna is also a mountain of joy. Children play in its meadows. Old men smoke pipes on benches that look up at its ridges. Shepherds still move flocks across its slopes as they have for generations. The human element hasn't been erased. It has been folded in, gently, reverently. Susitna does not push people away. It welcomes them, on its terms. In the end, Monte Susitna is not just a wall of limestone. It is a symbol of permanence in a changing world, of beauty in rawness, of nature's ability to sculpt form so dramatic it feels almost divine. Whether you view it from a valley, climb it with trembling limbs, or simply sit beneath it and breathe, Susitna leaves an imprint, one of awe, reverence, and a kind of lingering stillness that follows you long after you leave. Rising dramatically above the sprawling urban expanse of Monterrey, Mexico, stands one of the country's most visually distinctive and culturally beloved peaks, Cerro de la Silla, or Saddle Mountain. Its unmistakable silhouette, resembling a colossal saddle carved into the sky, is not just a natural landmark, but a symbol woven into the identity of a city, a region, and the millions of people who live in its shadow. With its jagged ridges, steep ascents, and commanding presence, Cerro de la Silla is a surreal fusion of untamed wilderness and metropolitan vibrance, a place where concrete boulevards and soaring eagles exist in the same vista. Cerro de la Silla is part of the Sierra Madre Oriental, one of the great mountain chains that define the geography of northeastern Mexico. Rising to a maximum elevation of 1,820 meters, 5,971 feet, it's not the tallest peak in the area, but it dominates the Monterrey skyline. The mountain is actually a series of peaks, each forming part of the saddle shape: Pico Norte, North Peak; Pico Sur, South Peak; Pico Antenna, Antenna Peak; and Pico La Virgen, Virgin Peak. From nearly any vantage point in the city, the mountain looms in the background, a watchful, rugged presence that reflects light at dawn and glows crimson in the dry desert sunsets. Its name, Cerro de la Silla, is both descriptive and poetic. It refers to the shape of a horse's saddle, an image that has inspired artists, poets, and citizens for generations. In fact, so iconic is this mountain that it appears on the official coat of arms of Monterrey, as well as countless logos, emblems, murals, and souvenirs. For the people of Monterrey, it is more than just a mountain. It is a monument, a spiritual compass, and a living part of the city's cultural identity. What makes Cerro de la Silla truly surreal is the way it merges urban sprawl with natural majesty. Monterrey, one of Mexico's largest and most industrialized cities, pulses with energy: skyscrapers, freeways, factories, and lights stretching across the valley like circuitry. And yet, this wild mountain, with its bare limestone cliffs and untouched ridges, looms just beyond the edge of this human world. You can be in a shopping mall one moment and on a dirt path ascending a rugged canyon the next. This juxtaposition is both visual and visceral. As you hike the steep trails of the mountain, you frequently stop and turn to find an aerial view of the entire city. A dense grid of life, industry, and culture sprawled below, framed by the dry, golden hills of northern Mexico. Few other places on Earth offer this kind of urban meets nature perspective, where you feel both elevated and grounded, both part of the city and somehow entirely apart from it. The most popular hiking route begins at the Colonia La Pastora, a neighborhood on the eastern side of the mountain. The trail is demanding and steep, often climbing sharply through loose rock, switchbacks, and exposed ridgelines. It can take anywhere from 3 to 5 hours to summit, depending on the route and pace. There are no gondolas or paved stairways here. It's all muscle and willpower. But as you climb, the terrain opens up to panoramic views, revealing not just Monterey, but the surrounding mountain systems, including Cerro de las Mitras, Sierra La Silla, and far-off ranges that fade into blue haze. Reaching the Antina Peak rewards climbers with surreal views and a sudden confrontation with technology. Radio towers and communication equipment jolt out of the summit like alien antennae. It's a strange moment, standing on a mountain so old, so wild, and suddenly encountering steel and blinking lights. Yet this too is part of the identity of Cerro de la Silla. It reflects the dual nature of Mexico's modern identity: ancient and innovative, natural and engineered, sacred and digital. The southern and western slopes of the mountain are less traveled, steeper, and more treacherous, but they reveal raw, untouched wilderness, including endemic flora and fauna that have survived despite encroaching urbanization. Desert succulents like agave, yucca, and nopal cling to the cliffs, and on rare quiet mornings, hikers might spot coatis, foxes, or hawks tracing the ridgelines on thermal currents. There's a quiet dignity to this part of the mountain, a reminder that despite its symbolic association with the city, Cerro de la Silla is not tamed. It remains wild. Geologically, the mountain is part of the Laramide orogeny, the mountain building period that shaped much of the Western Americas between 80 and 35 million years ago. The limestone formations visible on its slopes were once the floors of ancient seas. Long before humans walked these lands, these cliffs were coral reefs. The tilted strata and dramatic angles you see along the slopes are evidence of the Earth's slow-motion violence, of continents colliding, uplifting, and shifting over millennia. But even more surreal than its geological history is the mountain's deep cultural resonance. Long before Monterey became a modern metropolis, indigenous peoples held this land sacred. While exact tribal affiliations and rituals tied specifically to Cerro de la Silla are harder to trace, oral histories from the Huachichil and Coahuiltecan peoples suggest that high places such as this were revered as portals between the mortal world and the divine, places to commune with spirits, gods, or ancestors. In more recent history, Cerro de la Silla has been the site of political, environmental, and social discourse. It was declared a natural monument in 1991, protected by the Mexican government, though pressures from expanding development and tourism continue to threaten its ecological integrity. Environmental activists in Monterey have long fought to preserve the mountain slopes from illegal logging, quarrying, and construction, seeing it not only as a symbol but as a sacred ecological sanctuary in desperate need of protection. And yet, despite these threats, the mountain endures. On any given weekend, you'll see families, trail runners, and solo adventurers climbing its trails, sweating in the midday heat or watching the first light of dawn turn the city into gold from high above. Some come to test their endurance. Others come to take selfies. But many come for reasons they can't quite articulate, drawn by the silent pull of the summit, the humbling vastness, the reminder that something older and larger than the city still looms above, unmoved. At night, when the lights of Monterey flicker like a sea of fireflies, Cerro de la Silla turns dark, a silhouette, a black hole in the sky. It's hard to imagine that same place was, hours earlier, filled with the footsteps of climbers, the calls of birds, and the rustle of wind through cactus and stone. That duality, of invisibility and omnipresence, makes it feel almost mythical. It's not just a mountain. It's an anchor, a reference point for the soul, a compass for the mind. And perhaps that's the most surreal thing about Cerro de la Silla. It belongs to the land, yes, but it also belongs to the people. Everyone in Monterey knows it, dreams of it, measures their place in the city by their distance from it. Children grow up pointing at it from car windows. Lovers picnic on its lower slopes. Grandparents recall stories of climbing it when they were young. It is, in every sense, woven into the emotional map of an entire population. To stand on its summit, breathless and sun-drenched, and look out over the valley below, where life rushes by in cars and conversations, factories hum and lights blink, is to feel momentarily removed from time, suspended between earth and sky, wilderness and civilization. Cerro de la Silla doesn't just offer a view. It offers a perspective, one that few other places on the planet can match. In the southeastern spine of Australia, Far from the arid red deserts and eucalyptus-choked coastlines often associated with the continent's landscape, lies a different kind of terrain, one of soft highlands, alpine meadows, and cool winds that carry the scent of snow. Here, in the snowy mountains of New South Wales, rises the continent's tallest mainland peak, Mount Kosciuszko. At 2,228 meters, 7,310 feet, above sea level, it may not match the towering giants of the Himalayas, Andes, or Alps in sheer height or severity, but it holds an unshakable place in Australia's identity, blending national symbolism, natural beauty, and quiet surrealism into one sweeping panorama. Mount Kosciuszko's summit may be gentle, almost subdued in its topography, but what makes it surreal is precisely this. It is a landscape of subtle majesty, one that reveals itself in layers, not through imposing cliffs or impossible ridgelines, but through soft curves, shifting light, and a constant interplay between fragility and endurance. It's a mountain that invites contemplation rather than conquest, and in doing so, it offers one of the most unique high-altitude experiences in the world. Located within the Kosciuszko National Park, part of the broader Australian Alps, the mountain is named after Tadeusz Kościuszko, a Polish-Lithuanian military hero who fought for both Polish independence and in the American Revolutionary War. The naming was done by explorer Paul Edmund Strzelecki in 1840, who, upon climbing the peak, was reminded of the Polish patriot's tomb in Krakow. This moment fused two distant worlds, the forests of Europe and the highlands of Australia, into a symbolic whole that still resonates in the multicultural fabric of the country today. From a distance, Kosciuszko doesn't scream grandeur. There are no jagged peaks or violent drops, no glacier or year-round snowcaps. But its beauty is ethereal, almost otherworldly, in its minimalism. The mountain's rounded summit dome, surrounded by a plateau of subalpine grasslands and granite tors, is often brushed by low-hanging clouds, casting a silver hue across the land. In winter, the slopes become soft with snow, and the entire range transforms into a blank canvas of white, dotted with snow gums whose twisted trunks look like brushstrokes against the snow. Getting to the summit is uniquely accessible, a rarity for the tallest peak on a continent. Most visitors begin in the village of Thredbo, a ski town that hums with activity during the winter season but becomes a haven for hikers, botanists, and quiet seekers in the warmer months. From there, a chairlift lifts you nearly halfway up, followed by a well-maintained walking track that snakes gently along the ridgeline for approximately 6.5 kilometers, about 4 miles. The climb is not steep, but it is filled with surprises. Along the trail, you traverse a landscape shaped by millions of years of glaciation, a rare phenomenon in Australia. Evidence of the last ice age lies in the cirques, moraines, and shallow tarns, glacially carved lakes like Lake Coatapatamba, one of the highest in the country. These small alpine features whisper of a colder, older Australia, a version of the continent that contradicts the usual narrative of sun-baked plains and tropical shores. Then there's the flora, another element of the mountain's surreal nature. Kosciuszko is home to over 200 species of alpine plants, many of which are endemic, meaning they grow nowhere else on Earth. In summer, the landscape erupts in a muted explosion of wildflowers, snow daisies, alpine buttercups, billy buttons, and tiny white eyebrights that carpet the slopes in waves of color. These hardy plants endure freezing temperatures, high UV exposure, and fierce winds, thriving in the thinnest possible margin for life. The snow gums, perhaps the most iconic tree in the region, are masterpieces of adaptation. Their gnarled, low-slung forms grow sideways against the prevailing winds, their bark striped in hues of green, orange, and gray. Even in death, they remain haunting, bleached skeletons standing among the rocks like the bones of mythic creatures. At the summit, there is no jagged pinnacle or dramatic cliff. Instead, you find a gently domed rise marked by a simple trig point, a steel structure signifying the highest natural point on mainland Australia. It's an understated crown, fitting for a mountain that wears its significance with quiet dignity. On clear days, the 360-degree view stretches for kilometers, with ridgelines rolling toward the horizon in shades of blue and gold. On cloudy days, the world seems to vanish in mist, and you're left alone with the wind, the stones, and the beating of your own heart. The surreal quality of Mount Kosciuszko lies not just in the summit, but in the experience of arriving there, of walking through a land that seems suspended between seasons, climates, and identities. You might encounter a mob of eastern grey kangaroos grazing in the snowgrass, or wedge-tailed eagles soaring in the thermals above. The air is often crisp and dry, with a silence so deep it feels like you're walking inside a dream. Despite its accessibility, Kosciuszko is not immune to the forces of time and climate. The alpine ecosystem is incredibly fragile, and climate change poses a serious threat to the delicate balance that sustains it. Rising temperatures are shortening the snow season and changing precipitation patterns, putting pressure on native plants and animals. Conservation efforts are ongoing, but the challenge is immense. Every step on the mountain now carries a kind of existential weight, the understanding that this place, though ancient, is not eternal. Historically, this land has also been significant to First Nations peoples, particularly the Ngarigo people, the traditional custodians of the region. For thousands of years, indigenous Australians gathered in the high country during the summer months for bogong moth hunting, a seasonal feast and social gathering. The moths would migrate to the alpine zones in vast numbers, and communities from surrounding regions would travel to the mountains to harvest them, exchange goods, hold ceremonies, and reinforce bonds. Though the practice has faded, its memory lingers in the land, adding another layer to the mountain's surreal richness, a story of connection, survival, and belonging. In winter, Kosciuszko's personality shifts again. The meadows turn to ski slopes. The chairlifts hum. Snowboarders and skiers carve their lines into the snow, unaware perhaps of the mountain's quieter stories beneath the powder. Snowshoers and cross-country skiers explore the main range, tracing routes that feel at times like wandering across the roof of the world. Avalanches are rare, but the weather can turn suddenly. Even in such a tame-seeming landscape, nature always holds the final say. Yet, whether covered in wildflowers or crusted in ice, Mount Kosciuszko maintains a kind of modest transcendence. It is not a mountain that overwhelms with scale, but one that gently reveals its magic, step by step, breath by breath. There's something humbling in that, a reminder that greatness does not always announce itself with violence or spectacle. Sometimes, it rises softly, shaped by patience and quiet time, offering a place of refuge, reflection, and reverence. For Australians, Kosciuszko is more than just the highest point. It's a national touchstone, a place of school field trips and family holidays, of summit selfies and solo pilgrimages. It's a peak that doesn't separate people from nature but draws them in, inviting even casual hikers to discover the sublime in the subtle. It is a mountain that stands tall not because of its altitude, but because of what it represents: endurance, unity, and a profound, understated beauty. In the misty highlands of western Sichuan province, nestled between the easternmost fingers of the Tibetan Plateau and the lush Sichuan Basin, there rises a cluster of peaks so striking, so elegant, and so veiled in mystery that they have earned the title the Alps of the East. Known as Mount Susitna, or literally Four Sisters Mountain, this surreal massif is a testament to the silent power and graceful austerity of China's remote wilderness. Towering over the Qionglai Mountains, this range isn't just breathtaking in its scale, it is deeply poetic, wrapped in cultural lore, geological complexity, and a dreamlike beauty that seems plucked from a world beyond our own. Mount Susitna is composed of 4 distinct summits, each one named for a sister of increasing age and height. The peaks, Yao Mai Fong, youngest sister, San Fong, third sister, Fong, second sister, and Da Fong, eldest sister, form an ascending procession of alpine majesty, culminating in Yao Mai Fong, which rises to an astounding 6,250 meters, 20,505 feet. Often compared to the Matterhorn of the Alps due to its sharp, pyramid-like form, Yao Mai Fong is one of the tallest peaks in Sichuan and commands a kind of reverence not only from mountaineers, but from local Tibetans who see the mountains as sacred embodiments of ancient spiritual forces. What sets Mount Susitna apart, and makes it so deeply surreal, is the striking contrast between its peaks and the lush, almost Edenic valleys that surround them. At lower elevations, the landscape is all bamboo forests, pine groves, waterfalls, and alpine meadows, echoing with the calls of birds and the distant rustle of wind through prayer flags. Climb higher, however, and you enter a different realm, one of glacial cliffs, icy ridgelines, scree fields, and stone-faced verticality, where only the hardiest mosses and lichens cling to life. This dramatic duality makes Susitna a place of profound visual and emotional power. It feels like walking from one world into another in a single day. Geographically, Mount Susitna is situated within the Susitna National Park, which itself contains 3 stunning valleys: Shuangqiao Valley, Changping Valley, and Hazy Valley. Each valley is a masterpiece of surreal natural architecture. Shuangqiao Valley, the most accessible, is known for its serene lakes, photogenic forests, and panoramic views of surrounding peaks. Changping Valley offers a deeper plunge into alpine wilderness, with trails leading past glacial rivers, sacred Tibetan shrines, and old-growth forests cloaked in mist. Hazy Valley is the most rugged and least visited, a wild, windswept corridor of high-altitude tarns, called hazy or small seas, snowfields, and ridgelines that offer glimpses of all four sisters at once. There is also something uniquely feminine and graceful in the visual rhythm of the peaks, the way they rise, one after the other, each sharper and more remote than the last. This poetic configuration gives rise to the local legend that inspires the name. According to Tibetan folklore, the four sisters were celestial beings who descended to earth to help protect the land. When a ferocious demon threatened the valley, the four sisters stood in its path, transforming themselves into mountains to shield the people below. Their sacrifice was so noble and beautiful that the gods granted them eternal form, standing forever as guardians over the earth they loved. From a climbing perspective, Mount Susitna offers a rare spectrum of experiences. Da Phong, at 5,025 meters, is considered a popular trekking peak, requiring no technical climbing gear and achievable by most fit adventurers. The route to its summit passes through forest, alpine meadows, and a glacial moraine before arriving at the wind-whipped, prayer flag-laced summit. A surreal place where clouds drift below your feet and the other sisters shimmer across the sky like a row of sleeping goddesses. Phong and San Phong are more challenging, with technical sections that demand crampons, ropes, and ice axes, especially during winter. However, it's Yao Mai Phong, the youngest and tallest sister, that draws elite alpinists from across the globe. With its towering face of sheer granite and its knife-edge ridgelines often encrusted in ice, Yao Mai is a formidable expedition-level ascent, more akin to the high Himalayan peaks than the usual climbing offerings of Sichuan. Its remoteness, unpredictable weather, and avalanche-prone slopes have turned it into a coveted but dangerous prize, an Everest in miniature. But whether or not you climb these peaks, the spiritual and aesthetic impact of Susitna is undeniable. Tibetan monasteries and prayer cairns line many of the lower trails, where monks and villagers alike offer butter lamps and hang prayer flags to honor the spirits of the mountain. The valleys echo with the low hum of wind chanting through chortens, and it is not uncommon to come across Tibetan pilgrims prostrating themselves, forehead to stone, in quiet devotion. These are not merely hiking routes, they are pilgrimage paths, and the Four Sisters are not just peaks but living deities in stone. In spring and summer, the valleys burst into life. Alpine rhododendrons, edelweiss, and rare medicinal herbs bloom in waves of white, pink, and purple. Yaks graze in the meadows, their bells clinking softly as herders lead them to higher pastures. And in the blue light of dawn or dusk, the sisters appear to float, their snow-capped forms glowing like candles above the mist-filled valleys. It's no wonder artists, poets, and photographers have long sought inspiration here. The mountains don't just stand, they speak, in light, in silence, in shadow. The ecological diversity of the region is another layer in Susitna's surreal tapestry. The park is home to over 1,000 species of plants, as well as giant pandas, red pandas, tarkeen, musk deer, and a variety of endangered birds. Though elusive, their presence adds to the mystique of the place. This isn't just a park, it's a living wilderness, one of the few remaining in China that feels untouched by industrial time. And yet, despite its seeming isolation, Mount Susitna is surprisingly accessible. From Chengdu, the capital of Sichuan province, it's a day's journey by road, climbing steadily through terraced hills and deep gorges into increasingly wild terrain. The nearby town of Rilong serves as the primary base for visitors and climbers. Though small, Rilong has gradually adapted to the influx of ecotourism and mountaineering interest, with guest houses, local guides, and Tibetan homestays offering warm hospitality and buttered tea, all set to the background hum of mountain wind and singing prayer flags. Still, even with its modest tourism infrastructure, Mount Susitna has retained a rare purity of atmosphere. Development remains limited. No ski resorts mar the slopes. No paved highways carve through the valleys. In a country often associated with rapid urbanization, Susitna stands as a rare sanctuary, a place where nature, myth, and humanity still exist in harmony, delicately, reverently. In winter, snow falls thick on the highlands, transforming the park into a monochrome realm of frozen forests and sparkling ridges. The silence becomes almost total. Ice crystals hang from prayer flags. The footpaths disappear. And the Four Sisters, those eternal guardians, become even more mysterious, veiled in frost, wreathed in mist, staring endlessly across the land they vowed to protect. In the end, Mount Susitna is not just a mountain. It is a cathedral in stone, a poem written by geology, a dream made real through altitude and silence. To walk its valleys is to step into a world of myth and moss, of high prayer and deep solitude. To climb its peaks is to test your strength against something older than time. And to simply behold it, to look up at those four perfect ridgelines rising into the clouds, is to know, deep in your bones, that Earth still holds places more magical than imagination. In the remote northeastern reaches of Iraq's Kurdistan region, near the snow-fed veins of the Zagros Mountains, stands a jagged sentinel of both natural grandeur and cultural resonance, Halgerd Mountain. Towering at 3,607 meters, 11,834 feet, Halgerd is the second highest peak in Iraq, but the highest that lies entirely within its borders, making it a symbol of national and regional pride, particularly among the Kurdish people who revere its rugged slopes and mythic presence. Snow-capped through much of the year and cradled by some of the wildest terrain in the Middle East, Halgerd is not just a mountain. It is a bastion of solitude, mystery, and sublime natural power, its surreal beauty made even more poignant by the often turbulent history of the land it rises from. Approaching Halgerd is not like arriving at a conventional tourist site. There are no chairlifts, no visitor centers, and very few formal signs of development. The mountain is located in Choman district, near the Iranian border, in a region that feels on the edge of the known world, raw, expansive, untamed. Access is most commonly through the town of Sorin, itself a small but lively enclave of Kurdish culture, and from there, the road winds upward through deep valleys, terraced villages, and pastoral farmland where shepherds still guide flocks of goats and sheep along ancient seasonal routes. The landscape is austere yet endlessly textured, steep ridges, wild rivers, and forests that thin out into rocky alpine slopes. The surreal quality of Halgerd begins with its isolation. It feels almost like a forgotten mountain, not in terms of neglect, but in how it has escaped commodification, remaining pure and remote. When you stand on its flanks, looking out over the Zagros range stretching endlessly into the mist, the silence is profound. Only the sound of wind whistling through stone gullies and the occasional call of an eagle breaks the stillness. There are no crowds, no commercialization, only sky, rock, snow, and the pulse of the earth beneath your boots. This remoteness lends Halgerd an almost mythical quality, heightened by its seasonal extremes. In winter, the mountain becomes a frozen fortress, draped in heavy snow, its ridgelines carved into knife edges by storms. Avalanches are common, and weather conditions can change within minutes. Ice forms on the narrow footpaths, and temperatures plummet, creating an environment that feels both hostile and transcendent. For much of the year, its upper flanks remain snowbound, with glacier-like snowfields feeding the rivers that descend into the fertile valleys below. Yet comes spring and early summer, Halgerd's lower slopes awaken in a riot of unexpected color. Wildflowers, alpine tulips, poppies, and tiny mountain irises bloom among the melting snow, and grasses and mosses green the hills. This contrast between ice and flora, between the stark austerity of the summit and the verdant richness below, creates an emotional landscape as powerful as the physical one. It is a place where extremes coexist, where life and hardship are entangled in every view. For the Kurdish people, Halgerd is more than a peak. It is a cultural beacon, a place of both spiritual and historical significance. In Kurdish folklore and poetry, mountains are symbols of resistance, endurance, and freedom, qualities deeply embedded in the region's identity. The word Kurd itself is often said to be derived from the mountains, and the people are sometimes called Medji-Ci, the people of the mountains. Halgerd, in this context, stands as a kind of monumental guardian, a symbol of both the land and the struggles that have shaped its people. There is no officially sanctioned trail to Halgerd's summit, and much of the ascent is made by experienced trekkers and local mountaineers who rely on GPS and intimate knowledge of the terrain. The climb is considered non-technical but demanding, especially in deep snow or during spring runoff when trails become slippery and rivers swell. A typical summit route begins at Gunda Jarawa, a high-altitude village that serves as a natural base camp. From there, Climbers must traverse rugged scree fields, glacial streambeds, and high passes that test both stamina and navigation skills. As you ascend, the world below falls away, replaced by a stark, sweeping silence. The higher you climb, the more the terrain transforms. Grasses give way to stones, stones to snow, and snow to ice. The summit itself is often cloaked in clouds, and reaching it offers not just a panoramic view, but a sense of stepping into the sky. To the west, the Zagros ripple like a broken ocean of stone. To the east lies Iran, a vast and often invisible presence. To the north and south, valleys plunge into haze, dotted with the occasional flash of green from hidden villages and terraced fields. From the top, the sense of geographical grandeur is only matched by the emotional weight of where you are. Halgerd is not just a peak in the Middle East, it is the roof of Kurdistan, a place where history, conflict, culture, and nature collide in breathtaking silence. To stand there, on that icy summit ridge, is to feel both the loneliness of altitude and the connection to a larger story, of people, of place, of endurance. The surrounding region is not without its dangers. The proximity to the Iranian border and the historical tensions in the region mean that some areas near Halgerd may be marked by military presence or landmine warnings, remnants of past conflicts. However, in recent years, the Kurdistan regional government has made efforts to develop ecotourism and mountaineering tourism, and local guides have begun to offer their services to help visitors safely explore the area. These guides, often native to the highland villages, carry with them not only knowledge of the land, but stories passed down through generations. Of shepherds caught in blizzards, of weddings celebrated in the valleys, of rebels and saints who once took refuge among the cliffs. Wildlife here is elusive but present. Golden eagles, bearded vultures, and wolves are occasionally spotted, and the Persian leopard, though exceedingly rare, is known to inhabit parts of the Zagros. The region's biodiversity is rich but fragile, threatened by habitat loss and climate change. Efforts to preserve the environment are complicated by the political challenges of the region, but the people who live here often act as unofficial stewards, protecting the land not just as a resource, but as a sacred inheritance. In every way, Halgerd feels like a mountain apart, not just geographically, but existentially. It does not announce itself with glossy postcards or Instagram hashtags. It does not cater to crowds or infrastructure. It is a mountain of whispers, of slow discoveries, of silence that deepens with every step. Its surreal power lies in its purity, its refusal to be tamed or easily categorized. You must earn Halgerd, and in return, it grants you a view, not just outward, but inward. And so, in a world where access often equals popularity, and popularity often diminishes magic, Halgerd remains untouched, vast, and deeply real. It is a reminder that true wilderness still exists, that there are still places where the earth sings in ancient tones, where the snow falls unmarked by footprints, and where mountains stand not as playgrounds, but as prayers written in stone. Nestled in the lush heartland of Thessaly, Greece, between two mythological giants, Mount Olympus to the north and Mount Pelion to the south, rises the often overlooked but deeply enchanting Mount Ossa, also known by its modern name, Kisavos. At 1,978 meters, 6,490 feet, it is not the tallest mountain in Greece, nor the most frequented, but it holds a mystical weight that transcends height and fame. Steeped in legend, veiled in ancient forests, and pierced by deep gorges and windswept ridgelines, Mount Ossa is a surreal blend of mythology, biodiversity, and hidden wilderness, a living echo of a world where gods once walked among mortals. Mount Ossa's mythological importance is not an afterthought, it is foundational. In the vast body of Greek mythology, Ossa occupies a unique space. According to ancient tales, the Elodi giants, Otus and Ephialtes, sons of Poseidon, sought to storm the heavens by stacking mountains atop one another. Their audacious goal, to overthrow the Olympian gods. They placed Mount Pelion atop Mount Ossa, and planned to place Ossa atop Mount Olympus to reach the sky. Though the tale ends with divine punishment, the symbolism remains etched into the landscape itself. Ossa is a literal and metaphorical bridge between the mortal earth and the divine heavens. Yet beyond its mythic past, Ossa is one of the most diverse and surreal mountain landscapes in the region. Its slopes are covered in dense beech and fir forests, alpine meadows, and hidden waterfalls that flow year-round from springs fed by ancient snowmelt. The atmosphere is almost enchanted. Fog drifts lazily through the trees in the morning, Sunlight slants like golden columns through the leaves, and the hush of the forest seems to muffle time itself. At higher elevations, the trees give way to rocky plateaus and windswept outcrops where wild herbs, aromatic pines, and clusters of orchids bloom in bursts of color during spring and early summer. Despite being surrounded by agricultural plains and coastal towns, Mount Ossa retains an astonishing sense of seclusion. Few tourists venture here compared to the more famous Olympus nearby, making the trails and ridgelines feel private, meditative, and ancient. This solitude is perhaps the mountain's most surreal quality, a silence that invites introspection, a quiet world that seems suspended between past and present. Every twist in the path, every distant bell from a goat herd, every crumbling ruin or carved stone feels like a whisper from another age. The upper reaches of Ossa are a haven for mountaineers and nature lovers seeking both serenity and challenge. A number of well-marked hiking trails snake through its dense lower forests and climb to the exposed alpine ridge, where panoramic views open up across Thessaly to the west, the Aegean Sea to the east, and the mythic outline of Mount Olympus to the north. On clear days, the peaks of Olympus, Myticas and Scolio, stand like sentinels above the clouds, while to the south, the densely forested hills of Pelion roll away toward the sea, their slopes dotted with whitewashed villages and olive groves. Along the trails, one encounters a rich array of fauna and flora, some of which are endemic to the region. Golden eagles, Eurasian lynxes, brown bears, and wild boar inhabit these forests, though they are rarely seen. More commonly observed are foxes, hares, and a vibrant array of songbirds, as well as wild orchids, saffron crocus, and medicinal herbs like oregano, sage, and thyme that grow in wild profusion along the sunny ridges and valleys. This biodiversity has earned Mount Ossa protection as part of the Natura 2000 network, a European Union program that safeguards sites of exceptional ecological value. There are few places on Earth where so many layers of meaning, natural, historical, cultural, mythological, intersect so organically. At one moment, you may find yourself wandering through a forest of silver-leafed oaks, the next resting near the ruins of an ancient chapel clinging to the edge of a cliff, the next sitting on a sun-warmed boulder beneath the wind-shaped summit, staring out over the land where Homer's heroes once marched to war and gods once intervened in human affairs. There is a timelessness here, a feeling that you are not so much visiting a mountain as entering a different rhythm of reality. Slower, older, infinitely more poetic. The village of Ambalakia, located on the mountain's northern slopes, serves as a natural gateway to the region. Known for its preserved 18th century architecture, including stone mansions and cobbled lanes, Ambalakia was once a hub of the textile and dyeing industries, famed across Europe for its red-dyed cotton. Today, it offers a peaceful base for visitors looking to explore Mount Ossa, with traditional guest houses, home-cooked meals of lamb and lentils, and access to trails that lead deep into the heart of the mountain. Another key access point is Karitsa, a village clinging to the eastern flank of Ossa, overlooking the Pagasetic Gulf. From here, hikers can ascend through forests echoing with the sound of cascading water, eventually reaching the upper plateaus where alpine winds blow across fields of stone and wild thyme. The contrast between sea and summit, visible simultaneously, is striking, a reminder of how Greece's mountains and coasts coexist in startling proximity, creating visual symphonies of green, blue, and stone. For those drawn to spiritual exploration, Ossa has long been a place of hermetic solitude and mystic retreat. Scattered across its flanks are ancient monasteries, some still active, others in ruins, where Orthodox monks once lived in contemplation, isolated in the wildness of nature. Many such sites, like the monastery of St. Demetrios, are still visited by pilgrims who come seeking silence, healing, and divine perspective. The monastic presence, combined with the myths of the gods, adds a unique layer of sacred weight to the mountain. It is a place of prayer, resistance, and reverence. Perhaps the most surreal aspect of Mount Ossa is its position in the Greek imagination. While Olympus looms with the grandeur of Zeus and the throne of gods, Ossa feels more intimate, more human, as if it were not the seat of deities, but the pathway to becoming divine, the place where ambition meets the sky, where myth meets mortal courage. The idea of stacking mountains to reach the heavens may sound fantastical, but when you stand on the wind-blasted summit of Ossa, the notion doesn't feel so absurd. The sky is close. The gods don't seem so far away. The sunsets on Mount Ossa are particularly unforgettable. As the sun drops behind the Pindus Range to the west, it casts long shadows across the ridges and valleys, turning the mountain's rocky skin into a canvas of burnished gold, deep violet, and ember red. The Aegean Sea, visible beyond the eastern slopes, glows like a sheet of hammered copper. And in those final minutes of daylight, when everything is quiet and the air grows still, Mount Ossa becomes something more than terrain. It becomes a memory of the divine, a shape not just of earth, but of story. To visit Ossa is not simply to climb a mountain. It is to walk a myth, to inhabit a landscape where the physical and the legendary merge seamlessly, where even the wind seems to carry the voices of heroes, poets, and forgotten gods. It is a place that demands not just physical movement, but emotional stillness, a surrender to a rhythm older than history. And in that stillness, something profound is revealed, not in thunder or spectacle, but in silence, in stone, in the subtle way the mountain holds the sky. As the Alaskan seasons shift, Mount Susitna, the sleeping lady, evolves in tone and temperament, but never in essence. She lies immovable on the western horizon, a guardian of stories, a muse for artists, and a living landmark for the people of Anchorage, Wasilla, and the broader Cook Inlet Basin. Her smooth silhouette doesn't just define the landscape, it defines emotional space, anchoring local identity in a way few natural features ever do. For those who live within view of her reclining form, Mount Susitna is not merely a mountain. She is a presence, a rhythm, a constant breath in the Alaskan story. During the long Alaskan winter, when daylight is scarce and snow blankets the earth in glacial silence, Susitna's figure becomes even more pronounced. Her blanket of snow, often deep and pristine, transforms her into a celestial figure, a goddess resting under the stars. Against the low, golden arc of the winter sun, she glows with a kind of cold light that makes her seem almost supernatural. And when the aurora borealis unfurls its green and purple curtains above her, casting flickering light across her snowy brow, the sleeping lady becomes a literal dreamscape, ethereal and unbound by ordinary time. Winter also brings with it a strange kind of intimacy. With roads difficult and wilds less accessible, Susitna becomes more of a distant but ever watchful companion, seen through frosted windows and remembered in quiet moments. Many Alaskans speak of how they watch her shape as they drink their morning coffee, how they measure their days by the way the sun or fog moves across her curves. In this way, she becomes part of daily life, not through intrusion, but through subtle companionship. Come spring, as the snow begins to recede and the light stretches longer across the sky, Susitna's lower slopes begin to show signs of the awakening earth. Though most of the mountain remains cloaked in white well into early summer, pockets of green burst forth, and wildflowers begin their delicate bloom in the meadows and wetlands that fringe her base. The juxtaposition of vibrant life at her feet and her continued repose above adds a surreal duality, as if the mountain is dreaming the world into color, into song. Birds return, sandhill cranes call overhead in migration, eagles circle, and loons can be heard across nearby lakes. Moose and bear begin to stir in the brushy woods that surround the lower flanks. And yet Susitna remains unchanged in form, untroubled by the motion around her. In this, she reminds us of the value of constancy in a world obsessed with speed and change. She is the still point around which the wild revolves. In summer, Alaska explodes with life and light. The midnight sun casts a soft glow even at 2 a.m., and on cloudless days, Mount Susitna's silhouette turns from silver to bronze to shadow as the sun moves slowly behind her. Her features become more subtle, blurred by haze, softened by heat, yet her emotional pull grows stronger. It is during these months that painters, photographers, poets, and travelers from around the world arrive in Alaska, and many find themselves transfixed not by Denali's icy crown or the fjords of Kenai, but by this mysterious woman of stone who rests eternally across the water. There's a deeply human quality to the sleeping lady, perhaps because she resembles us. In her posture, in the serenity of her reclining form, we find ourselves reflected. She is our weariness, our longing, our quiet hope. Some say she looks sorrowful, others peaceful. Some see her as a metaphor for grief, a reminder of waiting, of love lost. Others see resilience, the enduring shape of one who will not rise until the time is right. These interpretations vary, but they all circle around a central truth. Susitna speaks to something deeply emotional, deeply internal. When summer's light finally begins to fade and autumn lays its golden touch on Alaska, Susitna shifts again. Her slopes take on a more somber beauty, painted in russet, ochre, and rust, while the surrounding tundra ignites in rich colors beneath her. It's a farewell song to warmth and abundance, and in many ways, it feels like Susitna is dreaming of the summer she just witnessed. Migrating birds fill the sky above her. The days grow shorter. Fog clings more often to the inlet. And slowly, the first dustings of snow return, brushing her contours with white as if nature itself is preparing her for sleep once more. But even as the seasons turn and the world shifts around her, Mount Susitna remains ever present, a paradoxical force of stillness and transformation. Her surrealness doesn't come from dramatic sharp peaks or volcanic chaos, but from the emotional resonance of her shape, her story, her constancy. There are few places in the world where a mountain becomes so personal, not just admired, but known. People in Anchorage speak of her as if she's a member of the family, a grandmother watching over them from afar, or a sister lost in dreams. And this emotional connection has become part of the local identity. Songs have been written in her name. Her image graces local art, murals, business logos, and children's books. Anchorage artists have sculpted her. Native storytellers still pass down the Artna and Dinarina versions of her legend, keeping alive a tradition that predates modern Alaska by centuries. In doing so, they keep her awake in memory, even if her body sleeps in stone. There are also more modern stories that swirl around the sleeping lady. During the 1989 Exxon Valdez oil spill, activists invoked her image as a symbol of Alaska's vulnerability, a sleeping protector who watches silently while her world is harmed. In recent years, as climate change reshapes the northern wilderness, her enduring presence has become a kind of symbolic anchor, a reminder of both permanence and the fragility of the ecosystems around her. As glacier retreat and forests shift, Susitna remains unchanged, and this only amplifies the urgency of protecting what lies at her feet. Some have proposed that Mount Susitna could one day become part of a national monument or protected scenic area, not just for her ecological value, but for her cultural and spiritual significance. Such efforts remain in early stages, but the discussion alone is testament to the depth of feeling she inspires in those who live with her always on the horizon. And perhaps that's the greatest power of Mount Susitna, not in her geological form or her elevation, but in the way she lives in the hearts and minds of people. She is more than myth, more than mountain. She is a place where the external landscape and the internal landscape meet. A place where memory, legend, emotion, and environment all blur into something greater than the sum of their parts. When the sun sets behind her, casting her body into silhouette against a sky painted in fiery orange or dusky indigo, there's a moment, a breath, where time seems to pause. And in that pause, the sleeping lady lives. Not just in stone, not just in story, but in the very way we dream. This video is for educational or entertainment purposes only, and information provided in the video may be incorrect. If you enjoyed the video, consider subscribing to the channel and like the video.